at 9:03 a.m. And we will start with roll call. Trustee Anderson?
Here.
Trustee Kelly?
Present.
Trustee Lee?
Present.
Trustee Pope?
Present.
And I am also present. Okay, item 2, flag salute. In recognition of free speech and the following board agenda item, we welcome all and would like to note that saying the Pledge of Allegiance is not a requirement to participate in the business of this public board. If you do not say the pledge for religious, political, social, or personal reasons, you are most welcome here as an equal participant in the business of this board. Okay, and we have a flag in the background of Superintendent Lair's screen there. So for those who would like to participate, please rise. Salute. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, moving on to adoption of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Trustee Anderson?
Aye.
Trustee Kelly?
Aye.
Trustee Lee?
Aye.
Trustee Pope?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, so the agenda is adopted. Do we have any comments from the audience?
Hold on, give me a second to check.
It looks like we do not, Trustee Bruno.
Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to agenda item 5A, governance leadership session, which will be facilitated by Monica. So go ahead, take it away, Monica.
Thank you, President Bruno. Thanks, everybody. Good to see you all. It's one of those times when I'll ask you if you're comfortable to have your video on. There'll be minimal, as I discussed with each of you, minimal screen sharing, because you should have, and give me a comfort level by holding up, if you have a printed copy of the template we're going to be working through today, so I can see that you've actually got that paper. Nancy, Steve, Scott, looking, everybody making sure that you have your paper copy. Excellent, got a thumbs up there. Okay, good. That's want to make sure. Now, we sent these out when we worked together, gosh, 9 months ago, I suppose it was. The meeting guidelines, they were resent to you this morning, and I want to use them as a basis for a very quick activity by getting these spoken, heard. We're going to speak them, hear them, hopefully certainly understand them and live them a little bit. And we're going to do that just in alpha order. And I'm going to ask you to read 2 or 3 at a time, not needing to, you don't have to do a big stentorian dramatic voice, just read it so we get used to speaking to each other, watching each other, listening to each other. And as we're going alpha, Del Rey, that puts you up front. So Del Rey, I'd like you to read the first 3, going through the third one that says everybody's opinions count. Could you read 1 and 3? 1, 2, 3?
Wait a minute. This doesn't.
I am not sure what you want me to read.
Oh, it's a sample meeting guidelines.
Oh, the one that we received
This morning. Yes.
Okay, hold on. I got to get that up. Just a second.
Does your copy, everybody, have numbers on it? Because I don't see numbers.
No, they're not. They're bullet points.
Also, it sounds like it's got different content as well. Ours starts with we will keep our focus on the best interest of our students.
That's it. That is it. Yep.
Okay,
Okay,
sorry.
that's it.
The second is we will listen actively to all ideas. We will listen openly without preparing responses. And the third is everyone's opinion counts. We'll be open to the ideas of others.
Kelly, you're the next up in the alpha order, alphabetical. So the second one's on. So why don't you just read the next 2?
Okay. We will wait to speak until a team member has finished talking. We will keep our remarks brief and to the point so that all opinions can be expressed. And anyone can call a timeout if he or she feels the need for a break.
Thank you. Lee, would you mind reading the next 3?
Certainly. We will communicate openly and honestly with each other. We will respect differences. We will show respect, never dismiss or devalue others. We will be supportive rather than judgmental.
Thank you much. Nancy, how about the next three?
We will give helpful feedback directly and openly. All team members will offer their ideas and resources. We will build upon the ideas of others and look for common ground. We will paraphrase for understanding.
Scott, could I ask you to do the next three?
Yes. Each member will take responsibility for the work of the team. We will each be responsible for the success of the meeting, participate equally, address concerns. We will respect team meeting times, start on time, return from breaks promptly, and avoid unnecessary interruptions. And the third, we will stay focused on our goals and avoid getting sidetracked.
Excellent. And Steve, if you would conclude by reading the last three.
When we have a difference of opinion, we will debate the facts of the situation and avoid personalities. We will address process, not personalities. We will all work to make sure that there are no hidden agendas and that all issues and concerns can be dealt with openly by all members. We will work toward the future, learning from the past.
Excellent. Now, I know you've read those and you could intuit them and take them into your core easily by just reading them. But as I said, part of the reason we're doing this today is it's not a sequential exchange of emails. This is not a survey we're putting together and aggregating. This is again, I've used the term before, you are this multi-headed, gorgeous creature governance team. And so that's why I wanted you to literally hear each other's voices as we talked about this way. And also the meeting guidelines, folks, are a little bit of a microcosm of the more detailed, more in-depth work that will come out of the development of the governance handbook. Because a lot of these things, which were put in quite, not school language, but very conversational language, are very much the same tenets and principles we're going to be codifying in the governance handbook. So the other document that you got, which you just quick gander at, is the discussion guide. We were talking about that. It's the agenda. It is, as the term would say, guide. You know what a guide is. It's not, you have to take every step. Your guide will maybe go first if you're trekking down the Amazon, but you're going to be making the journey. And this is, we've said we were going to maybe take a break around 10 o'clock. That's fluid, depending on how we feel. When we have a natural break, we will take a break for stretch and coffee refills and all that kind of stuff. And you'll note that the end of our time is to say, what the heck is this document, this tool that we're doing? What's it for? We're not going to spend this Saturday morning together developing a handbook that's going to go on the shelf and literally or proverbially gather dust. So we'll talk a little bit about those questions, and I sent them in advance because they are reflections, because sometimes they're like, I had never thought about how we're going to use this going forward. I'd really never considered what an important tool this is for onboarding a new member. So that's the lay of the land this morning. So we'll be flexible. As I said, it's the guide in the way that, that Dwayne Johnson was the guide in the Jungle Book. It's just going to guide us in our discussion. Hopefully we're going to make progress, but it is not uncommon. As you can imagine, this is a pretty meaty document. It's not uncommon in a session like this, when we let the work take as long as it takes, that we may get to a point where the superintendent and the board president with the gavel will say, we're so glad we've got this work done. We have more to do. And maybe we'll proceed by identifying a subcommittee that continue to kind of wrap up the loose ends and come back to the full board. As you know, it's common practice when a board does a governance manual, a governance handbook, to when it's freshly birthed, is to bring it forward at an open meeting, a regular meeting, and adopt it, almost as you were adopting a policy. So that's it. The point of it, as you know, is it's another absolute tool to maintain cohesion in the board. We spend a lot of time talking about, the collective board and its role versus the individual board member. But it is, my friends, a living document. It is not brought down from the mountain on stone. A lot of boards, in fact, there's language, I think, in the template that we're looking at today. Some boards make it codified in their handbook that they're actually going to review it like every 2 years. That may not be appropriate. Not everybody does that. Some do it just when a board change necessitates it, such as filling a vacant appointment or after an election or that sort of thing. So it is a living document and it's a working document, but it really is going to codify. That's its purpose, is to codify. It has two purposes. One, to codify these agreements that we'll reach about, hey, this is the way we do our best work as elected and appointed trustees and the way we work best with our superintendent and his or her team. But it also is another one of these opportunities to communicate. It's a record. You communicate to the public. We made a commitment. This is our board. Now, if I had any thought at all that a member of the public was going to just say, oh, this looks like fun reading, I think I'll read the school board governance handbook, they probably won't. But nevertheless, it's a truly important message to send. So that's kind of the point of it. So I wanted to mention to you just quickly, because we'll come back to it. I think when we talked before, I made a couple of book recommendations. One of them, my screen's doing that weird thing, is this book called Call to Order. I'm going to recommend it to you because not only is it really the gold standard about how meetings are run, but it also is more of a macro thing about governance behaviors in general. So Call to Order, I recommend to you. Good. All right. Thanks for reading the sample meeting guidelines. Everybody pull up your template, which you've got that paper copy, you've got a pen. I know a lot of us like to make notes. We're not going to share it on the screen, but if you'll see that one of the key squares in our Brady Bunch here is the inestimable and quite valuable Carol Hunt. So as we talk, Carol will be in the document and she'll be putting notes in there. And when a discussion on, hey, that's good, let's tweak it this way, let's do that. When a consensus edit percolates to the top, Carol, if you would, when you put that in there, I would suggest put it in either in another color or put it in under yellow highlighted. And that way you can cross-reference it when we get back to it. So that's the process. We talked a lot about I to we. Again, this is another tool that helps us get there. So that said, when you are weighing in on a suggested language, word choice, tweak, whether it's a concept, whether it's the language, whatever, you of course are speaking from your point of view, your perspective. Who else's perspective could you speak from, right? It's your perspective. But remember that the final document is not the result of 6 authors, but it's the one author of the board. So that's kind of my lead up. And now we're just going to jump right in. So what I'd ask is, I think because there are not dozens and dozens of us here, we can probably keep our microphones on. Rather, normally in a large session, I'd say, hey, stay on mute. But if that gets to be a problem, we'll change that. But for just, so we'll just sort of be in this cyber room together. Let's keep our mics on and let's just jump right in. So you see that the cover page is blank because that's literally just the cover page where normally you put the names of the trustees. It would say Steve Bruno, president, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, Scott Lair, superintendent. And then the next page it's really sort of the back of the cover page, which says, if you'll be with me, it says unity of purpose, roles and responsibilities, norms and agreements. I'll go quiet for a second, ask you if reading that simple, it's actually just 2 sentences, any tweaks, edits, modifications you want there, chime in. Okay, I'm not hearing any. Again, this is not set in stone, so let's move on. We don't need to, what is that horrible grammar thing several years ago at one of the award shows, one of the guys was up accepting an award. I think it was the Grammys. And he said something that somebody else said. He said, well, we're in total agreeance. Well, from that point, I think now people actually, I hope Merriam-Webster hasn't gone there yet and put agreeance in as a substitute for agreement, but we don't need to spend time being in vehement and total agreeance. If we agree, we move on to the next page, which is the first section we're going to talk about. Like we said in the discussion guide, we're going to talk about this whole section about building the governance team. The first page asks a couple of questions. What do we want to accomplish? What do we stand for? And the bullet points proposed there in this template, Kelly, I'll get to you one sec, are answers to that question. Similarly, on the next page, roles and responsibilities. So we're going to focus now on what I believe is page 2 on building a governance team unity of purpose. Kelly, your hand's up.
Yeah, before we move on to page 2, can I just make a comment about the footer? I don't see a need to have that footer on every single page.
Footer's going to go away. Yeah.
Okay,
In
good.
fact, Carol, you can excise that footer now.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's important, but not necessary.
No, it is. It's more informative than important, but not necessary. Thanks, Kel. Perfect
Linda?
example of, yes, Nancy.
I'd like to find out do we have any public online?
At the last check, Eugene said we had no one. Eugene?
Okay.
We
I
do
just
not.
wanted-
No, it's just
I didn't hear that.
yeah, it's just us.
Thank you.
You would see their little tile on the screen along with all the rest of our tiles. And right now, Carol is the last one. So if anyone else pops up, it'll show up on the screen.
Well,
good.
Okay, thank you.
and just so you know, we're in a webinar mode. So the 10 of us in tiles, the rest are participants. So you might not see that. Us as hosts can see that. So right now there's only 10 individuals on, which is just us.
So
Okay.
you would have to click on participants. Sorry, my bad. I didn't realize that was possible. Okay.
Oh, yeah. Very good. Okay. What are we thinking about that page? Building a governance team, unity of purpose, starts with in the italicized statement there. It talks about the next full paragraph. Then it poses in the gray bar the 2 questions, and it poses bullet points that answer those questions. The floor is open for comments, suggested edits or tweaks, or validation.
We need
Kelly?
to raise our hand for acknowledgement.
Oh, that'll help. Yeah. Yeah, Kelly, go.
Okay, so in bullet 2, I think the word greater is unnecessary. It's the community. It's just superfluous. And then in bullet 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, remove the phrase never resting on our laurels. That's my suggestion. And on the next bullet, we want to exemplify a positive culture rather than perpetuate a legacy of.
Very nice.
Not just talk about it, but actually do it.
Kelly, thanks for offering those. Before I ask for anyone else, if you have any to offer, are there any comments of assent or asking for clarification for any of the suggestions Kelly's made?
Could you please restate how you wanted the last bullet to read?
We want to exemplify a positive culture.
As opposed to perpetuate a legacy.
So just
Yeah.
taking out perpetuate, legacy of, and adding the word exemplify.
Kelly, I think that's both 2 of the notes that you made. I'll point out one thing. This doesn't need to be flowery language. I mean, that for, never resting on our laurels is a little bit dramatic, and this does not need to be dramatic or florid. Yeah.
Well, and also I think it's important that it's very, what's the word? Positive, that we're saying what we will do, not what we won't do, and that it's clear and not, extra language.
Gotcha.
Very specific.
Understood. Other comments or thoughts? Dr. Lee, I see you've got a hand up.
Yes, I appreciate those previous edits. I was looking in the same direction. I see mention of facilities and excellent program, but I see no mention of improving student achievement for our most vulnerable populations. I'd like to see something about equity mentioned in what we stand for.
Absolutely.
Great point.
Idea. Yeah, I was looking at it with the eye of an editor, not the eye of a publisher. Very good.
Yes, indeed, because we're answering the question. What are thoughts on this meriting its own bullet versus being tried to be absorbed into one of the others? I feel it might merit its own bullet. Any thoughts, anybody?
Own bullet.
Thumbs up.
I'm flexible either way. I think these are all good suggestions.
Dr. Lee, would you take a stab at how that bullet point might incorporate itself into the what do we stand for list?
Yeah, maybe something like we stand for equity and the improvement of all, vulnerable student population, student achievement, but the improvement of achievement.
How about outcomes?
There you go. Yes, that's what I was trying. My brain's not on you.
Yeah, I know.
We stand for equity and the improvement of all student outcomes, or how do we get that vulnerable populations in there? Improvement of
educational outcomes for all.
Yeah, for all vulnerable populations.
Student population, yeah.
Or just all populations, to be more of a targeted universalism approach.
Well, and perhaps adding something like providing the supports needed for vulnerable populations to succeed. Committed to all, and we also are committed to providing the supports that vulnerable populations need to succeed.
Yeah, I think in this case, I think in this case, the use of the descriptor vulnerable is not what I was referring to earlier of just being a florid language. It's an accurate descriptor. Vulnerable populations.
Yeah, I think vulnerable also is kind of going out of favor at this point, as far as that you're basically labeling people and then they are taking on that persona, rather than saying, it's something along the lines of, we stand for equity and the improvement of outcomes for all students, and to providing the necessary strategies to meet student populations where they are. Or that doesn't sound very good, but something
to
about
address the needs of all student populations.
how about to meet the needs of all student populations?
Which
I just said.
which implies.
That's why I thought of it, because you said it.
Yeah.
Sorry. So let me read it. We stand for equity and the improvement of outcomes for all students, and to providing the necessary strategies to meet the needs of all student populations.
Do we hear consensus for a draft on that? We can certainly.
I'm not sure equity is the word to use, because I don't know that the general parent population even understands what you're talking about.
Kelly,
However,
Kelly, can you reread it, please?
Yeah, we stand for equity and the improvement of outcomes for all students, and to providing the necessary strategies to meet the needs of all student populations. Or how about of each student?
I must say, you were speaking of what's in and out of favor. I'll tell you that really there's a great push to start referring to our students not as all, but as each and every.
Yeah.
It's a subtle but significant difference. I think that's a good catch, Kelly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And every. Okay, so one more time. I'm sorry. Strategies to meet the need. Okay, we stand for equity and the improvement of outcomes for all students, of educational outcomes. No.
I like outcomes in general.
Yeah, I do too. Of outcomes for all students, and to providing the necessary strategies to meet the needs of each and every student.
That's good.
Everybody like that?
Carol is our scribe. Did you get that?
No, she's going way too fast. Either she needs to read it much slower or email it to me.
I'll paste it in the chat. And Dr. Lee, are you good with that edit, since this was your idea? Sorry.
Yes, I can't see the chat, but yes.
Okay.
Scott, do you see any problems with it?
No, I like it.
Good work.
Okay.
Yeah, I like it.
Good work.
And a good catch too, because I don't think we have the educational outcomes or outcomes even in that.
Oh, we don't have chat.
We don't have chat because it's webinar, Kelly.
Okay, sorry.
You'll have to just send it
turn
back.
off chat because it's been very distracting for the public, and we've made other means for the public to be able to speak to us.
Got it.
Gotcha.
I'm sending it to Carol by email.
Okay, understood. Okay.
Good job.
So very good work, you guys. I do want to say, Nancy, this is you made an interesting point. We have this tricky line that governance teams walk, but we have to, if we must go one way or the other on educating our parents, our community. You're saying, hey, maybe they don't know what equity means, because I mean, we live and breathe it as education leaders, you know, in the equity, inclusion, diversity vocab, right? We live and breathe it. And you're saying, well, maybe a lot of parents don't, but this is where we have an opportunity. Remember, this document is sending a message, and this is a way, it's an educational opportunity, I think. You raise a good point in a larger discussion, which is one of the first steps we need to do in improving and being an equity-focused organization, letting our community, our parents know we are. The answer is yes. So I really appreciate you raising that point, because it's not to disagree that maybe there are some who say, well, I don't know what that means. Isn't equity the same as equality? You know, which it isn't, but it does point up the need for further education in the community.
Yeah,
Monica, I can tell you, my son writes for a newspaper, and he's told to write to a 7th grade level.
Yeah, we know that.
Nancy,
Yeah.
however, the word equity is really critical to societal changes that are occurring right now. And if people don't know what the word equity means, they need to learn it, because it's critical at this point in our society. We all need to understand the difference between equality and equity. And if they don't understand it, maybe it will inspire them to look the word up. It will give an opportunity for learning. I think it needs to be normalized. That word needs to be normalized.
And I think it provides, like Monica said, an opportunity for us to educate folks around what it does mean and what it represents. And so I get your point, Nancy, but I think that my work or our work would be, how do we inform folks to what this is all about and what this statement means to us as a board?
Well, then maybe we could use the word and then in parentheses say what it means. I don't know, but I'm just saying it's going over the heads of a lot of people in this area.
That's, I would.
Maybe we could do like an addendum or something, or a footer, you know, what's it called? I didn't go to college, sorry. A footnote, basically.
Well, you know what?
Like a
Well, I would
glossary of
say
terms?
put
Is
a
that what you
pin in it. Put a pin in this, because adding a line in a document is not your equity work, of course. This is just pointing out that it's a continuing opportunity for parent engagement and education. But I would put a pin in it in terms of using this document to carry that education burden, but just be aware that this is shining a light on that responsibility you have to educate.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm just shooting from the hip here, but it might be that your equity policy might be something that you might work into a superintendent's note on the website. You might do this is old school term. You might do a press release that says, "Oh, the board's this is our equity policy, which is adopted and we're constantly reviewing," or something like that. So it's not a one and done. I think we talked about that before, but maybe just as a group and individually, you might be thinking of ways is how do we not miss opportunities to bring those wonderful 7th graders, Nancy, bring the 7th graders up to it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, Scott writes.
Yeah, Scott's column. Yeah, Scott's column is one way for sure.
Every month at the end of it, we could have, new school word of the month or something.
Yeah. Well, the other piece is, I think if it's throughout our documents, whether it's our UDL, whether it's our blueprint, I mean, there's tons of different places we can include and reinforce what it means to the board and the district. And I think that's how we also get it out as well. I mean, I think it's that important.
Yeah, it's a question about seeing the opportunities and making more. Okay, right. Good discussion. Good discussion.
I have a raised hand, so I'll just go ahead and interject. Monica had mentioned about an equity policy. And to my knowledge, we do not have one.
Correct.
And so that might be a good follow-up. We're setting the larger vision, that we're committed to equity, but what does that mean? How is that embodied and enacted in our learning environments and spaces? That's something that we as a board definitely should define and have codified so that it's clear to all of our employees and, everyone involved in the district what we mean when we say equity.
And that's a perfect example of it. That's the kind of discussion. Policy development and adoption is done in open meetings. So boom, another great opportunity to educate the public. There is a CSBA equity policy, sample policy, Scott, I'm sure you're aware. So,
yeah. Yep.
Okay, let's keep moving. That next page.
Actually, before we go on to
sorry,
the next page, do we see any sort of a need to add something here about what we stand for as far as the type of education? I realize it's in our goals, our mission, our vision, but we obviously stand for those things, and this document is saying what we stand for. So maybe it wouldn't hurt to reiterate, that we want, to provide what's a safe. What is, I'm sorry, I don't know our mission.
Why don't we just add our goals and our mission to the documentation?
Exactly, that would be awesome. And then on as far as what we stand for, we stand for supporting the goals, vision, mission, and goals of the district.
Which Kelly might be like with the first bullet. Our shared purpose is to have the best learning environment for all students. It's pretty broad. Maybe we need to, as outlined or as something in there. I don't know.
Yeah, our shared purpose is to have the best learning environment for all students. And then that way, if our vision mission gets edited at some point, we don't have to actually change what we stand for, just change. But no, I like the idea of I'm sorry, I'm waffling here. I like the idea of putting it in here. In fact, I had a note to that effect further down. So our shared purpose is to have the best learning environment for all students and to support the vision, mission, and goals of the district. Does that sound right? Or is that too much?
Pretty clear. I think, Del Rey, you raised, you give us a chance to demonstrate a key point here, which is this template we're working from is straw, not cement. So if as we go along, you say, yeah, this template would be strengthened by addendums or appendices, such as our vision mission statement, then you can absolutely do that. There's no need to stay in this structure as it's presented. So thanks, Del Rey, for making that clear by mentioning that.
So we could then, for the first bullet point, we could put our shared purpose is to have the best learning environment for all students and to support the vision, mission, and goals of the district, Appendix A. And then Appendix A would be the vision, mission, and goals of the district.
Which could be changed if said language change.
Correct.
Right.
Other thoughts, Steve, Nancy, Lee?
Yeah.
Looking good? Okay.
It works for me.
All right, let's move on. Oops. That next page is a recap of things we talked at great length about the roles and responsibilities. I would ask you to, this one doesn't pose it structurally in the way of a question and bullet point answers, but it just restates the roles and responsibilities. They're pretty straightforward. Any tweaks, edits, modifications that would make it stronger for you guys?
Yes, I'm just not really liking the word "we" in every bullet point. So for instance, number 1, could we possibly say set direction for the district as opposed to we set the direction?
I think you're exactly right, because the way the statement before the colon says the 5 responsibilities are, at that point, it also means that the verbs could become the INGs. Our responsibilities are setting the direction, establishing the structure,
providing support. Oh, that's great.
Because if you see down in the next section, we carry out these responsibilities in these job areas. I'm not sure establishing district.
I noticed under that one, it says student learning and achievement. Maybe that's what to put in the other part of it.
So are we thinking of changing these to be the, setting the direction, establishing direction, providing support? Is that what people are thinking?
I think so, yes.
I think we have consensus there. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And Kelly also has her hand up.
Yeah, so these are not prioritized, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so those should be bullets because they're not sequential, nor are they by priority. So they need to be bullets. And then I noticed that it says the same thing. We set the direction and establish district direction. I think that the second one, where we carry out these responsibilities in each of the following job areas, maybe it would just be better to establish district direction, for example, goals, vision, mission, equity statement, policy, etc. Oh, look, I had equity statement in there. Just because it's redundant and there's no reason for it to be in there twice. And like, it doesn't explain it any further.
You know, as I look at this, Kelly, what I'm seeing is I can see that this was crafted in sync or to sync up with the Masters in Governance curriculum areas, and it needed. You see what I'm saying? Because there is a class called Setting Direction, and then you're into all these other things, finance, facilities, da, 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 da. So that's, I think it's a little bit of a round peg square hole to put establishing district direction as a job area.
Yes.
But other thoughts, anybody? Dr. Lee?
I had a thought on it. Since we changed the other, the previous section to be more active verbs, I think that perhaps just deleting that word establishing under the job areas section would make more sense, because that is a job area of the district, the district direction. But the word establishing, there is kind of a distractor now that we've made, the other ones more of what, the active responsibilities are. I do agree that the job area, that this district direction is a job area along with the others that are listed, but that word establishing is a distractor there.
Right. Because when you list those responsibilities, as we just described, it's redundant.
And then do we need to have the word job? Could we just say in the following areas, and then for the first one, instead of setting direction, just say goals, vision, mission, equity statement, policy, and
but
then
isn't that district direction? Aren't all of those things? Don't they fall under that, instead of having to explicitly list them out, because things may change over time? Just the words district direction cover that.
I agree. I think, Dr. Lee, your point is there. If we label it out, what if we forget? Or I wouldn't want to limit to say the direction might not be something that we don't know tomorrow, maybe the direction that we set the district in.
And things are dynamic, and we've had to respond to things that we've never had to respond to over this past year in the pandemic. So district direction.
Amen. Yeah.
I
But
agree
we want
with
to be careful we don't box ourselves in as well.
Yeah, I understand what you guys are all saying. I just, and maybe I'm just being nitpicky. I tend to do that, but it just still seems redundant to me to say we set direction and then in the job areas of setting direction. It just seems silly.
It is. It seems redundant. If that area of responsibility is something, and you wanted to say, in something to do with mission and vision. Because all the rest of these things, if a district has a mission, a vision, and goals, look at all that other stuff falls under a lot of that too, mission, vision, and goals.
And I see your point now, Kelly, too. It's almost, we're saying the same thing again. We set it up above by saying the board, we established the direction. Then we say, again, we're doing the direction as a job duty, where really student learning outcomes, finance, facility, those are all pieces within that. So it's almost redundant to say it again.
It is. Maybe we should. The bottom part is kind of like a descriptive of, it's more descriptive, like it's all of these areas. So I don't think that listing, policy, maybe just say policy, right? And then that would encompass anything, equity statement, vision, goals, mission, LCAP, all of that.
Yep.
I don't know.
I look at it more critically from what Trustee Kelly said. It really seems like the 5 responsibilities sum it up, and I'm not sure why the whole section on we carry out these responsibilities in each of the following job areas is there, because all of those things feed into the 5 items, the 5 bullets that are above in the responsibilities. I mean, finance, facility, all those, I don't know why those things need to be listed there when they're incorporated in and implied in, the direction, accountability, That's what policy does. Community
Yeah.
leaders is community relations and advocates. I mean, I don't understand
Yeah.
why
And
that whole section.
Nancy, thanks for your patience, and Dr. Lee. And in fact, that's why I was making note that those bullet points in the bottom half of the page seem to be more in service of enumerating the curriculum areas in the training that CSBA does here, but they are all, and when we do these trainings, as those of you know, you go and you talk about all 5 of the responsibilities as seen through the lens of finance, or all 5 of the responsibilities as seen through the lens of this or that. So I think they may be not really germane to this document. Nancy, you've been so patient. What have you got to say?
I just think that we have not mentioned curriculum development. Maybe that's what it should be changed to, setting the direction of curriculum.
Well, I think that's implied to be part of the whole student learning and achievement.
Yeah.
But actual curriculum in the district is something so very important to parents right now and what their children are being taught.
Right.
And I would see that issue.
And I would see it falling under the direction and structure. And I mean, it really falls under those 5 big bullets, Nancy, where with the exception of community leaders, other than communicating to community leaders, the board would set the direction and approve the curriculum, the structure at which we, it's all right in there.
I would use that word curriculum because that's what parents are screaming about right and left. What's my child being taught?
What if we were to just remove that entire section and leave it just as the top? And then that way it's just saying that in all aspects of the district, we set direction, we establish structure, we provide, maybe expanding on the lead-in sentence to that list. The role of trustees is to stay focused on the big picture while fulfilling 5 responsibilities in.
We've already talked about how it doesn't feel necessary to call them job areas. So that would apply to this first sentence and also the bottom sentence.
And maybe not even saying fulfilling 5 responsibilities, period.
And there they are: setting direction, establishing structure.
And I'm leaning more towards what Trustee Kelly mentioned as well, just deleting the "we carry out these responsibility" and the bullet points there, and just going straight to the superintendent assists the board in carrying out the responsibilities in each of the, we're not calling them job areas, whatever we're calling them.
Key areas or whatever,
Key areas,
Well,
and just to be devil's advocate, Scott, do you see any area of the district that we would not be setting direction, establishing structure, providing support, or ensuring, any of those 5 things?
No, I mean, to me, it's very broad with the scope of the work that you 5 would do. So to me, I can't think of anything that would not fit within that.
And Steve, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, it's okay. If we're going to take out the list of job areas, I think we should change that opening sentence to while fulfilling 5 responsibilities, period. And take out in a series of job areas.
I just did that on the screen. Here's what I wrote. It just says the role of the trustees is to stay focused on the big picture while fulfilling 5 responsibilities, setting direction, establishing structure, providing support, ensuring accountability, acting as community leaders. And we can even take out the in the first and second bullet. And take out.
I like the list of the second one, though. Maybe we can add some of those to the top one.
They're different, though.
Achievement.
Yeah.
They're different things, though. I understand what you're saying, and I don't object to including them. But if we did keep them in, they would need to be separate from that top list, because the top list is not about areas of our key focus. They're like overarching functions,
right? And
areas.
I don't see what the problem is in leaving them in.
Delray, hang in there. We'll get you in a sec. Yeah. What I sort of alluded to earlier, I think that you see that those 5 key responsibilities are responsibilities that you carry out in whatever area. if there's a finance issue, you have to do those 5 things. If there's a facilities issue, you approach it from those 5 things. So that's why this is, please don't tell my colleagues, but I feel it's a bit of a commercial for Masters in Governance. That's what it's doing. It's listing the curriculum. Those are the course areas of training. And they are the course areas because they are the areas we train in. How do you set direction in all of these sorts of things? But they are different, strictly speaking, than just identifying what your responsibilities are. So
But it also tells the public what we do.
This is true. Delray, thanks for your patience.
We did not include hiring and giving direction to the superintendent.
Well, see, that comes under human resources.
It's the
Public
role of the
doesn't know
board.
any of that, though.
And that's
It's the
part
role
of,
It's
and
the
isn't
role
that
of
part
the
of,
board.
but
It's
isn't
the
that part
role
of
of-
ensuring accountability? I'm just curious, isn't that one of our responsibilities under the item of ensuring accountability that falls under that? That's why I'm saying in my opinion, I think we should remove the commercial for the Masters in Governance, because it just causes confusion. All of those items that are under the job area's responsibilities are implied through the 5 statements that are above it. So,
We've lost
maybe this,
Delray.
Delray, maybe she lost. Steve, any thoughts as you hear the discussion?
I think Del Rey brings up a good point, because that is one of the chief responsibilities of the board. I definitely don't like the first bullet that currently exists in the job areas, and I am leaning towards thinking that list is not really necessary, as some have said. I don't know.
You know what? How about we, in the interest of letting this get due consideration, make a note that this might be an appendix area. Perhaps it might be an appendices that said the board, carries out its responsibilities throughout or something, and there's an appendix to the thing which lists among the areas the board blah 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 or something. Just a thought. Delray, now you're back.
Yes, well, I was always here. I just took my video off.
Okay.
In sake of time, can we move on from this item? Each of us give our information via email or to you or whomever, and look at each individual's idea of this particular line item and come back to it as a whole later.
I think that makes sense. That's why I'm saying let's put a pin in it, and then can sort of by email compendium see where the where people are coming out. Kelly, did I see your hand?
Yeah, can I just make, I'm sorry, Dal, I'm just going to make one last suggestion. What if we were to take some of the bottom section, turn it into a sentence or part of the sentence above? So in other words, it would say the role of the trustees is to stay focused on the big picture while fulfilling 5 responsibilities in the areas in all areas of the district, including policy, student learning, and finance, financial. But I mean, somehow incorporating policies.
Well, you're getting too wordy, Kelly.
Well, it's less words because we're taking out a whole section, but it's kind of a compromise for keeping in some of the things that you guys are saying is important. All right, I will submit this via email.
I think Delray, your suggestion is right. That specific thoughts could be expressed in a separate follow-up email can address this. Superintendent, I see that you have a hand as well.
And I was trying to refocus myself on, because I've heard a couple statements about the public, and this is the target audience for this, the Perfect. 6 of us, or is the target audience the community? Well, and that's where I think I was getting, because I'm going back and forth, like, are we trying to make sure we're inclusive to show what everyone read this, or is this a document that we the 6 of us live by, and it's more of a not internal document, but I don't know if I'm saying this right.
You are, and I would respond this way, Scott, is that it's real purpose is to help you build and maintain cohesion. So you can do these 5 areas. As a byproduct, if it similarly sends a message to your community that we are committed to working well. Okay. We don't just show up, 15 minutes before, open our packets and we are committed to working in this way. So it is a byproduct of the work, but its main purpose is to build and maintain cohesion.
That was my exact question.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, and we mentioned that it has a very real world, for those of you that can cast your mind back to when you join the board, it's part of the onboarding materials for that person who, was a candidate and boom, you're on the team. This is a very key document, but it is for you to work from. So,
and then one more. Oh, go ahead, Nancy. Sorry.
I was just going to say, or if they're interested in running for the board, they could see this and say, this is what it entails.
Good point. Good point. Scott?
My last comment, then I'll let this one go. But maybe what we do is we have the 5 areas and then we carry out examples such as, so it's more of a descriptor of what those might mean. And you're not saying these are the only things we do, but here are examples, to your point, Del Rey, of, maintaining fiscal responsibility, hiring and firing superintendent. Maybe we give examples within that lower block of what these 5 statements mean or how they can be carried out, but we're not boxed into these are the only things. So that's something to think about as we provide feedback to this
interesting
page.
I think that's a good point. All right, good work. Can we move on to the next page? All good? Let's go on to the next page. Please note that on the I guess it's page 5 as it's numbered there, that under the gray bar of governance norms, we'll go back to that opening paragraph, but you'll see a lot of bold-faced students there. That's not suggested text. Those are questions being posed to you, because since people started doing governance handbooks back in the old day, whenever that was, we've changed, technology has become a bigger part of it. So this is why you could have found a perfectly workable governance handbook from 30 years ago that would not have to worry about having devices off or on or this or that. But nowadays, many boards are finding they do want to put it in your handbook. So that's what that's there for. So let's go back to the top and read that first paragraph, which talks about it tries to define culture. It tries to talk about agreements, about how, I'll go ahead and throw it out there maybe as a discussion starter. Sometimes we see sort of interchangeable use of the term agreements and norms. Personally, I've never been a huge fan of the word norms, but it's used all over my organization, so I acquiesce. But how does it work for you? Because you see in that beginning paragraph, what other thoughts might you have? Because it says teams have these agreements on how they'll treat each other, and then the gray bar calls them norms. Any thoughts about that issue or about that opening paragraph? Just unmute and chime in.
I'm okay with it as is.
I'm not sure what it's saying here. Is it saying we're not going to do any of these things, like have bandwidth use in the house?
Well, Nancy, we're not down. We're still above the gray bar in the opening paragraph. Yeah.
I know personally, I've seen it interchanged each way, whether it's governance norms or collective agreements. I mean, whether you're doing like PLC work. So either, personally, they kind of are interchangeable to me. So I'm fine with whatever the group wants.
Okay. Other thoughts? Anyone? It's pretty conversational. It's meant to be easily understood.
Oh, I see.
Behavioral ground rules. You'll note that it articulates in the last sentence of the opening paragraph about that norms can, it talks about build and maintain positive culture or shift a negative one. Kelly, you'd mentioned earlier about, maybe opting when possible to keep articulations and characterizations positive. Maybe shift a negative one maybe is superfluous, because building and maintaining positive, starting from positive or starting from negative. But any other thoughts on that opening paragraph?
This is just a description of what the culture is, and it could be a negative culture. So I see no reason to take that out. I think it reminds us that culture is our responsibility. And we can either make it positive or negative.
Okay.
So-
Other thoughts on the opening paragraph before we get down to some of the bullet points?
I agree with Ms. Kelly.
I'm sorry, I have a question before we move on. Did we skip the superintendent assists the board in carrying out its responsibilities, or was I busy typing and missed that? I'm sorry.
Oh, the bottom sentence of the previous page.
Yeah, because I had some comments on that. I'm sorry, guys.
Actually, you're correct, Kelly. We did, the only sort of mention that we made of it was that for consistency's sake, we would not use the phrase job areas.
Right.
Okay, so here's my question about this phrase. Superintendent job area, yeah, and leads the staff toward accomplishment of the agreed upon district vision, mission, and goals. Seems lacking in what the district needs to accomplish. I'm not sure if it's too much or too little. Does vision and goals cover everything? Should we relist the vision, mission, and our goals here in this section? Okay, so we kind of already touched on this. The whole statement seems a little bit lacking, but
Well,
I'm willing to just let it go.
Well, I'm confused on why it's even there, because that is the role of the superintendent. Why are not the role of each board cabinet member, president, clerk, representative also listed? Either I would strike that or add the others to that whole page.
I would submit that if we're not listing those inaccurately, what we have already said, we didn't like the term job areas. If you're not listing those at this point, that explanatory tag on sentence is not needed.
Yeah. I mean, I guess if you say roles of the board in the first section and roles of the superintendent in the second section, then it kind of makes sense. But again, I mean, it's implicit that the superintendent assists the board in carrying out the responsibilities. So I kind of feel like maybe we just get rid of it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Get rid of that whole phrase, the superintendent assists the board, eliminate all of that?
I was thinking about it. Do you not like that?
I would not say you eliminate it, but I would add the role of the president, the job description of the president, the job description, and you eliminate the word job, but just saying for right now, and add clerk and role of the representative as well. Because
so in other words, we'd have the role of all trustees, then we would specify the role of the superintendent, the president, the clerk, and the representative.
Yep.
I think that's taking us more granular. And at the top, it says the mutually agreed roles of board members and the superintendent with the 5 points. So I'm also finding that last sentence to be just more, it's duplicitous. It's like, it's already stated at the top that those are the mutually agreed roles. The job descriptions that are already pre-existing outline what each person does and what their responsibilities are in that role. So I don't know if it's necessary to restate them here. This seems more like an overarching vision type of statement.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with Trustee Lee there, because just that main thing, that the mutually agreed on roles of board members and superintendent, we are, let's make sure we're not just looking at it too much from our bubble. We understand that, of course, it's implied that the superintendent supports the board in every bullet point. Remember, this is your document. This is not.
So from my perspective, it's already 10 o'clock. I don't want to get too bogged down in the exact wording of that page. I think there's a lot of content that's more important in later pages, and I'd just kind of like to move on personally.
Since we've already agreed that people are going to weigh in on how to handle the template's second half of the page, maybe people could also in their email follow-up weigh in on that, the need or not need of that follow-up sentence. Does that make sense, Steve, President? Mm-hmm. Okay. Kelly, thanks for doing that. We did skip over it. Thanks. Okay. Meanwhile, now we're back to the next page. Now, Nancy, as you were saying.
Point of
those
order,
poll-
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but it says
Yes,
we have
certainly.
a break from 10 to 10:15, and we're 2 minutes into that break, and I truly need one.
Oh, okay, good. Well, let's take it. When we started, I mentioned that we would see if it felt like it was needed, and it sounds like it is. So it's 10:02. Let's come back at 10:17. You can take a stretch break, get coffee. We'll come back and be ready to barrel through. Okay, see you in 15 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Perfect. Great.
Scott, I also have a question about our conversation about following up an email. Since this is an agendized item and it's a public item, is that violation of the Brown Act if we're submitting our suggestions to the rest of the board via email?
I would submit them suggestions to me and or Mr. Bruno as the president, and then we would, I don't think we're going to get through this whole thing, so we may have to do a subcommittee. So I would say we put it, and then Steve and I, and we'll try to get one more member. Do you agree, Steve, with that, or?
I have much fewer comments on the second half of the document, just so you guys know. I'm not going to be holding you hostage.
Nah.
I promise.
But I think if you're good point, if we submit our comments to myself and Mr. Bruno that way, or even Carol, that way we can have them and then try to integrate them.
Okay. Hello? Let me mute. I was. That's why. Back to me.
Okay, we seem to be back pretty much. Del Rey will be clicking on in a sec.
I'm here.
Good. President Bruno, thank you for keeping us there. Dr. Lee, thanks for making that call for the break, because we need to be refreshed and revived for the next time together. Steve, I'm thinking, in the interest of efficiency, because we've already sort of established, we know when we are working through things that they might be necessitating some offline individual work and a follow-up expression from individually. I wonder if that's something that you might be able to monitor, and when you get your sense and you feel like, as you did say, in the interest of time, let's take this and do our individual follow-up contributions. Would you feel comfortable? Okay, that seems like, yeah, because, all right, so let's move on now.
Monica, could I interrupt you real quick? One thing that I think
Scott.
some folks had jumped off camera, but Kelly asked a good question. It's probably best if people are sending feedback, make sure you email to me and Steve, not the whole board, just so we can get that feedback. So I don't know if everyone caught that before they jumped off.
Very good point to identify. Yeah.
So thank you, Kelly, for picking up on that.
Yeah. Mr. Brown, thanks you. Okay, now the next page, it's actually 2 pages, but it's just because there's a little bit of hangover on the second page there. I want to skip the bold face. I want to look at the kind of sort of opening paragraph. We talked about the first one, the governance norms gray bar. Then it talks about that little professional governance standards list. But then let's skip past the boldface questions, which are pointed questions to us to talk about technological changes in board meetings. And let's deal with the bullet points that begin from keep from taking disagreements, et cetera, onto the following page with the last one, leverage historical experiences, and then the and above all. And then we'll swing back to the boldface things that specifically have to do with do we need to articulate norms regarding technological digital challenges. Is that, am I clear in what I'm asking us to do here? We're going to start there, and I would ask you to look at the bullet points that begin with keep from, working through the next page, one's leverage, and then again, there's a little bit of probably unnecessary florid language where it says, and above all, boldface, all caps. That may not be necessary, because in fact, it's just separating the last and the next to last bullet point there. So before we jump in, Dr. Lee, you've got your hand up. Jump on in.
Yes. So the first bullet, keep from taking disagreements personally. Individuality is embraced and respected. I have a problem with that word individuality. Maybe something like diversity of opinion is embraced and respected. Is my suggestion.
Interesting. And I see we've got just a typo there, Carol, with we don't have the closed parens. Kelly, your thoughts?
Yeah, on this whole bullet, I don't care for the language. It's very negative. And so I was recommending something along the lines of accept differences with professionalism, understanding that these differences are normal, expected, and healthy, and that they bear no judgment toward me as a person.
Kelly, that made me want to put my hand over my heart, and I could see, the trees waving in the sunset and all. But I want to tell you this: brevity is our friend. If there's a way we can distill those thoughts into a few words, that would be useful. Dr. Lee, when I liked how you had a phrase that was actually more descriptive and better than individuality. Refresh our memory. What did you say? Diversity of opinion? Or something
diversity
like that?
of opinion.
Yeah, diversity of opinion.
Yeah,
Maybe
My main thing is that I don't want it to say keep from taking disagreements. It
How about
needs
if we
a positive statement.
make the verb, if using the words that are here, if we made it the positive statement, it would be something like embrace and respect diversity of opinion.
I like that.
Because that's what we're saying. And then the byproduct would be
Leave it
not
at that.
taking it. Any other thoughts on that? Let's go to the next bullet up there. Other tweaks or modifications that are jumping off the page at you? And remember, we want to be consistent. In fact, for that, I meant to, the second bullet is not consistent. All the other norms start with a verb.
Yes. So that should be changed to just show respect. Good catch.
Mm-hmm.
I would add courtesy to that as well. Respect and courtesy.
Very nice.
Like that. So instead of be respectful, it's show respect and courtesy toward all others. Oh, you know what? I rewrote this one as well. Sorry. I was on a roll this morning. Okay.
10 words, Kelly, 10 words or less.
Show toward all others in the learning community, never devalue never devalue or dismiss others, period.
I wouldn't put in the learning community, just all others I think is best.
Yeah.
If regardless of where they're coming from or how we're interacting with them, we need to treat everyone respectfully.
And do we need to say do we even need to have the second part of it? Like just show respect toward all others. Show respect and courtesy toward all others, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Dr. Lee, backing up for just a moment, you said you didn't like the word individuality there. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just would like to know why you didn't like that so that I can keep that in mind for future items.
Because it didn't fit with what was being stated. And I think that Monica pointed out that what we're really talking about there is more about diversity of opinion, not individuality.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and I agree with what Kelly said about striking the dismissing and devaluing. That's negative language again. So I really like that revision for the second bullet of showing respect and courtesy for all.
I don't think you need for all. It's kind of implied that we're going to respect all. So respect and courtesy, period.
I like that.
Interesting. Yeah.
You want brevity, Monica? We've got brevity. Show respect. Be nice. How about that?
So that said, that the wordiest bullet there is the one that begins with commit. The norm is commit the time necessary to govern effectively, and then it begins to give the for instances. How do you feel about the sort of that second lengthy statement? Anybody?
I'm sorry. Which one are you talking about? Commit to the effective deliberation. Yes. Yeah. So
the bottom one. Commit the time necessary.
It's 1, 2,
Bullet
3,
5.
4, fifth one.
Oh, okay. I'm in all cases. I think that we need to change out make a commitment to and say commit to.
Where are we?
You're in the previous bullet. We're on the second bullet, the fifth bullet down, Kelly.
I understand that, but the two above it say make a commitment or be committed.
I see.
It just needs to say commit to effective deliberation. And then on this next one, okay, let me read it again. I changed it to dedicate the necessary time to govern effectively. And then just
so we wouldn't have commit.
I do like that because that's a few too many commits in a row.
Yeah. Dedicate the necessary time to govern effectively, including, and then if you want to be more descriptive, we could put it in parentheses with an example for an e.g. Be prepared, participate, and yeah, be prepared, participate, and that's it. And understand.
My feeling is we're trying to keep others brief and we're not giving examples on others. So I think just dedicate the time necessary to govern effectively and then cut it off right there.
Yep, I agree.
Everybody live with that? I think I agree too. Okay, next one gets a prize for brevity. Any other thoughts on the bottom three bullets preceding and following the boldface and above all?
I have a problem with the and above all.
I do as well.
I think all of these are equally important. And then two, that last part of the focus on students' best interests, on what's best for the students, I don't understand. And it is the touchstone that allows us to have our differences. I suggest striking that. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I would cut that one off right after the word interest. Just focus on students' best interest.
And make it plural interests with an S?
I was debating that in my head. I could go either way on that.
Yeah, after the dash, it gets quite murky there. Okay. How about just so we don't skip it, leverage historical experiences. What are the authors trying to tell us to do there? Any ideas? Is that more confused? Is that adding more shade than light? Does it talk about, remember what a norm is? A norm is, hey, this is how we agree to behave with each other.
I would strike that whole bullet.
I think yeah, I
I'm
sense
okay with
consensus. Okay.
I mean, we could make it shorter and just say, learn from past experiences.
But if
Period.
our focus is on how, I mean, it says our norms are how we treat each other. So I don't, I'm leaning towards striking that.
Valid. Okay.
I agree. The validity of that is that because we're talking about, these are things you do in the convening meeting experience. The leverage historical experiences, that's your individual work you do at home, in your heart and in your head and everything. So that's good. I think it's very strikeable. So if we wanted to add some specifics, now that we're in this digital world about norms, do you feel it is too granular to start talking about, be sure your cell phone is off and all that kind of stuff? Dr. Lee, you have your hand up. I don't know if it's in response to my question or just another thought.
Yes, it is in response to your question. I find it very troublesome and problematic to start making up, guidance and rules of how we're treating each other that, in the bolded section here, these items are really about policing each other's behavior and environments. And I have a big issue with that. I think we're going way off in the weeds. In the 80s, boards got the right, board members have got the right to call in by phone. There wasn't a big hoopla about, how we're going to act on the phone. Are you chewing in the phone? Is someone in your background making noise? Is your pet meowing? Are your kids making sounds? I don't think all of that is necessary when we think about how we treat each other. I think that these suggestions that we've worked on so far are really more on point. Right now, there's a big hoopla about virtual meetings and again, I think we could get off in the weeds about trying to control board members and their environments and so forth. When we have holographic ability to come into meetings, then we're going to need some guidelines around that. But I think just more being transmodal the way it is written now, whether I'm coming in through Zoom, coming in by the phone, coming in as a hologram, or I'm face-to-face, these are things I can do to treat my fellow board members, in a way that is creating a positive culture. So I disagree with all of these suggestions here about cameras, eating, Wi-Fi, family, using bandwidth.
I think you're right. There's nothing that would date this document more than writing it for 2022. And then the other thing is, in a way, are we giving trustees the well-deserved benefit of the doubt to say that when you have as a norm, be respectful or commit the time, that being respectful is not having, your toddler wailing in the background and then not, blah, blah, blah. So it does seem perhaps a little bit unnecessary at least, and maybe insulting at most, to say we have to have a norm that tells people to turn their phone off, Other thoughts, anybody?
So, as far as it's disrespectful to have your toddler wailing in the background, at the same time, sometimes that's life. The ones that got me were pets and kids in and out of camera range. Sometimes that's beyond your control. And as far as family use of other devices consuming bandwidth, I'm the one that signed up for the board, not my entire family. And I don't feel that it would be right for any of us to be telling the others' families what they can and can't be doing during a board meeting.
Yeah, agreed.
I'm hearing consensus.
Now, that being said, as far as drinking on camera, as Scott takes a sip.
I'm sorry, Steve.
We have water bottles with us during in-person meetings. I think we've established that having something to drink is not disrespectful in our eyes. Eating, I've seen that go poorly with other boards. Because it hasn't been an issue for us, I don't think we need to address it. As far as cameras on and off, my preference would be that cameras are on the majority of the time. But sometimes something comes up, for instance, a kid or a pet coming into the background, and it might be good to turn off the camera. Or when I was connecting from home, I was having connectivity issues, so I turned off the camera to minimize bandwidth. So I don't think that we actually gain much by putting in formal policies.
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree with what Monica and Dr. Lee also said about, that these norms are the same regardless of what your mode of communication, whether you're on the phone, on a Zoom, in person, or yelling from the other room. It doesn't matter. You're still going to respect diversity, show respect, commit to, all of those things still apply. And we don't need to define exactly what that means. Mm-hmm. We're adults. We know what we're doing.
That's exactly where the adults I'm saying. I mean, no, not to cast aspersions on our student body, but I mean, this is not an ASB, governance norm where we have to say, kids, you can't, bring your sub sandwich in here like that. So I possibly some well-intentioned thoughts with people raising this issue, but I feel, Nancy Del Rey, are you joining in this consensus that it seems like it's a little superfluous that adults know what be respectful means?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do agree on that standpoint. But what I also think is what should be mentioned in our norms is not to accept text messages, do not accept Facebook messages, do not respond during a board meeting when people are trying to contact you, do not respond via email, because I believe that has happened in the past and it's just rude. It doesn't give the other board members a chance to communicate with the public during a board meeting. That's my thought.
If I may, I'm going to indicate that in the next section, which is going to be very meaty, we're going to really want to work as quickly as we can to it on the protocols. There is one that has to do with some of the aspects of meeting behavior, and there is a reference. I think it's one about board meetings in the agenda. That might be a way where you could. I think it says all it says now is put your cell phone on silent, but we could address this issue maybe then. Del Rey, would that be all right?
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah, and as far as that goes, I do think it's a good idea to have it in the handbook because I made that mistake early on. I own up to that, and I should not have. And viewing this as a way to onboard new board members, I think it's good to put that out there.
That's a very good point, Steve. I can recall in one of the districts in my area had a great furor when the son of a sitting board member who was a faculty member in one of the schools was texting his mom what to say and do during the meeting, which of course is not only bad form, but just plain old, bad Brown Act stuff. But then I also remember in some of my early days, we had a meeting on an election day, and I'll be darned if our CBO was not monitoring returns and emailing people updated returns during the course of the meeting, like you were watching the Super Bowl, fourth quarter, and here we are. Anyway, okay, I think we've done a good job with that. Carol, have you made note of our discussion as appropriate? Carol, hang on, Kelly, one second. Let's just make sure Carol's with us. Okay, Kelly, your thought.
I just wanted to kind of go back over, we kind of rushed through these and made little changes here and there, but I want to make sure we're all in agreement or agreeance. Embrace and respect diversity of opinion, show respect and courtesy, participate in effective deliberation, which I changed, each listening openly while everyone is allowed to express her point of view. Is that one to be shortened, or are we keeping that each listening openly? And then commit to open and honest communication, dedicate the necessary time to govern effectively, be collaborative, maintain confidentiality in an effort to foster trust. I don't know where that came from. Focus on students' best interest and be present. This is in regards to Del Rey's last comment. Be present, minimize distractions, and participate fully in the meeting.
Are you trying to send Carol home? No.
No, I'm writing
No, I'm kidding.
and emailing it to her, so no problem.
You're a good typist. You're getting all that down.
The only thing that I would say is I like having the focus on students' best interest as the last one. So we should move that to the bottom.
Yeah, okay, move that to the bottom. Okay, will do. And then I'm going to go ahead and send this to Carol.
You ought to move it to the top.
Or to the top. I like that. That really shows how important it is. I like that. Is everybody okay with that? Okay.
Okay. Now, take your either if you're scrolling or flipping or both. Look at what we've got ahead of us. We have about a half dozen areas, which are the protocols, and some of them we're going to be able to say, yes, I agree, that's characterized accurately and this or that. Some of them are very specific, like a board meeting date and time. This draft will not make reference to your formula for meeting dates and times. Some of it will not comport with what may be your policy processes and this or that. One of the categories, as you leaf through, is fairly large, and that's the one about board meetings and agenda. The others are not as lengthy. But my thought is this, because I think, it's 10:40 almost, we really are making pretty good progress here. I had thought if we were running way behind, we might try to do a divide and conquer and split into twosomes and each take a section. But I feel like our better work comes when we're all here together. So can we would you, President Bruno, feel like we should just barrel ahead and see how much we can accomplish?
I like the idea of staying together as a group.
Okay, good. Well, that said, let's jump right into it.
Excuse me, Monica, are you saying stay later than the 12 o'clock hour?
No. I'm saying that if we feel like there is additional work, we talked about the possibility. What's often done is that a subcommittee, which in a 5-member board means usually the president and one other board member, acts to kind of tie up the loose ends and come back to the full board so you can do the final tweaks that way. So, Dr. Lee.
I had a hand raised, and I want to pose this to President Bruno. I believe our board bylaws say things about committee on the whole and subcommittees and that we don't have them, but I may be mistaken. I am a new member. And two, just in terms of like building our board dynamic and, how we progress ahead, is it possible, President Bruno, for us to, see how much we get through in this meeting and then perhaps have another meeting where we all come together, not where it's just the superintendent and one person and then bringing it back? Because then to me, it seems like we've all had input in all parts of the handbook. Is that possible, or is there a fiscal reason why we couldn't or something like that?
As far as subcommittees go, I know that we actually do have subcommittees. That's nothing new. as far as whether we wanted to do this as a subcommittee or another special meeting or something, it really comes down to scheduling. But let's see how we do. If we can keep moving along, it might not even be a necessary discussion.
And it might not even be should the follow up next step, it might not be something that necessitates my facilitation, because you seem to be so, you know, you've got the dance steps down. So, okay. Dr. Lee, does that it somewhat answer the question?
I would just say it only seems like we have the dance steps down because of the guidance of the external prompting, and that's keeping us on step.
Duly noted. Okay, jump in and let's take a look at the first.
Kelly,
Yeah, this will come back to the board at a regular meeting for approval. Is that not how it's going to work?
That's common practice.
We would have time to review it again, provide any feedback at that point, and then have a final version to vote on.
Certainly.
Yes.
Okay. Would that satisfy what you're looking for, Dr. Lee?
No, what I'm more looking for is a collaboration like we're doing now for the entire document, and not
well then I'm going
to not delegating to a subcommittee with the superintendent. Okay, good. Well, let's proceed then. All right, the first one is on leadership responsibility and roles of the board. First paragraph: thoughts, comments, suggested tweaks, or consensus that it pretty much stands acceptable.
I have something for this.
Go, Nancy.
Sometimes in board meetings, stuff gets brought up in a very negative way because people don't find out if it's being done ahead of time. So in a way it's being slamming the district instead of being brought up as a question like, do we do this or have we done this? It's the district doesn't do this and I want to put it on the agenda. It's about time we do this. I would like to suggest that board members know or ask about the situation before they bring it up in the public meeting, as well as we always had a practice before by gentleman's agreement, I suppose, that if there was a huge question on an agenda item, say with finance, that they would call the finance person on the phone and ask about it so that that person would be ready to address their question in public and not be caught off the spot.
So regarding that, I think it's better for us to channel our communication with district employees through the superintendent. Agreed. Because the district employees, for instance, in finance, don't report to us. So since we only have one employee, I think it's better that we ask him and then he asks them. As far as bringing things up in advance before they come up at the meeting, speaking only for myself, many of the times that I request that something be added to a future agenda, I'm doing that because the idea of it came to me during the meeting. Either because of a public comment or something that happened during the meeting. So, although it is kind of sprung on us a bit.
I have not heard you do it in a way that slams the district, Steve. I've heard it being done when it does.
But, I mean, sometimes public brings something up that they're upset about. And I think what we're doing, we're already providing it in advance because we're scheduling it for a future meeting. So
okay, never mind. You're not catching what I'm trying to say.
So you guys, can I see if I understand what you're saying, Nancy?
Kelly, I know you hold that thought, but Dr. Lee's been patient. I think she had something she wanted. Yeah.
Yes, I was looking at the last line. Normally, requests from board members shall be communicated through the superintendent. I just wonder if it's okay to add the president and superintendent, because sometimes as a board member, it's not something I want to bring direct to the superintendent. I want to run it through my president, to see if that's even something appropriate to bring up to the superintendent, for example. Is it okay that we add through the president and superintendent there?
If that's
I don't have to go through the president to get to the superintendent.
No, but what she's saying is sometimes
she's
you
saying
might
and not
go
yeah.
to the superintendent. It might be about the superintendent, for goodness
That's
sake.
that's up to the board member.
Right. So she's asking if we could just add and or president or president
Right.
and.
It's not restrictive. It's not a two-step process the way I heard you describe it, I think. So
and either way, with the word normally there, that allows us some flexibility. I know that I've reached out to other board members in the past saying, hey, I was thinking about bringing something like this up. How do you think I should go about it? And, you know, sometimes it's good to bounce something off of each other. They don't necessarily have to be even the board president.
And I've had full access to you, Steve. I have no problem with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nancy, I think as we go through some of these protocols, some of the kind of the issues and sub-issues that you're talking about how things might come out from either community in board meetings might be addressed in some of these.
I'm talking about board members.
Yeah. Well, that's why I'm saying this very first paragraph is basically a recapitulation of the general role of the board as a collective as opposed to individual board and what the superintendent role in there. Kelly, you had a thought?
Yeah. I think maybe what Nancy's trying to get at is when we get to the, not just this, but when we get to the end of the meeting and we ask for agenda items based on maybe something that happened during the meeting or a thought that just popped into our brain. I don't feel like those have to be agenda items, that really they could be presented as, can we look into this and potentially set it as a board, as an agenda item in the future? And then that way you are asking about, you know, is there a policy about this and can we look at it and potentially put it on the agenda? And then the other thing is, like Steve was saying, sometimes like when Lisa's giving her, you know, budget reports, sometimes questions will pop up during the meeting. But I do agree that if you know in advance, when you review the agenda, that you should present those questions prior to the meeting so that the people can be prepared, and then ask them in public so that the public knows that these questions were asked and the person is prepared to provide a public response.
Exactly. Nobody wants you to play I gotcha. And that's and we don't want to put our employees in that spot.
And I do want to push us because we're coming to another protocol on agenda, and the idea that Dr. Lee's mentioning about, you know, perhaps presenting an issue to the board president or the superintendent or the superintendent. There's that in fact is, you know, how it typically the way an agenda is developed, the board president and the superintendent are working together. So this would make very good sense that you would go to the board president and or the superintendent.
Okay, but Monica, I'm going to be specific here. I was trying not to be specific because I didn't want an issue to develop. But if, say, I came forward and I said, you know what, there is total ignorance when it comes to special education on this board. Now, you never do anything for special education. I've watched it for years. There's never been any kind of talk about special education. I think we should start doing that right now. And that particular person, if I had no background, I didn't ask anybody about it. I didn't know that you have done multiple things on education throughout all of those years. But I came up to the board in public and said, we didn't do this ever. Why aren't you doing this? I think that's wrong for a board member to do and slam the rest of the board in the district. That's
I agree. I think it could be posed as a question. You know, what have we done in the past? Can we bring this up as a topic of discussion?
Right. That's all I'm saying.
I don't think we need to formalize anything in there. I think that gets back to what we've already put in about being respectful. And, you know, I think that sometimes we all come across differently than we intend. I know that my family has given me that feedback several times, that the tone that I give off is not necessarily what I intended. So I think it's good to remind us all to try to be mindful. But I don't think we need a separate policy for that because I think that's covered by the norms we just did. And as far as the the giving people a heads up about the questions, that's actually covered in a protocol a little bit later. So we
Very
don't need
true.
to get into that right at the moment. But I can see what you're saying. But like I said, I think that's covered by the norms, and we don't need to set up a specific protocol for it.
Interesting point.
Okay.
Dr. Lee, your hand's up.
Yes, I think we're on the board meetings and agenda section. Are we?
No,
on
we're
that?
not there.
We're not there
still,
yet.
We're not there yet. So we're still, so that first square is a block that really is talking about the collective power of the board. If there's nothing that you feel needs to be tweaked or modified there, I'd like to work our way down to the 3 remaining boxes on that page. Can we do that? Okay. So the next one has bullet points, and there's a little bit of this is echoing to the protocol language that we just did, but some of them are more specific, having to do with like the 3rd bullet point, which has to do, because now we're getting into talking about being present at school events and things like that. I'd ask you to take a look at the 2nd box with the bullet points and weigh in with any tweaks that you feel would be critical to making it more clear.
I'd just like to say, I think it's fine, perfect the way it is.
Other thought?
Well, in the 2nd box, the represent the board at various school events, particularly those held at specific sites assigned to members annually on a rotating basis. To my knowledge, we don't do that.
If that's
Correct.
not your practice, that phrase can go away.
And also, in this day and age, I'm hesitant to say represent the board at various school events when that may not be an appropriate thing to be doing right now. With,
you know, it's interesting because, like, for those of us who in you know, perhaps not the big urban areas, you know, every time when you go to the football game, are you, quote, representing the board? Well, no, you're there, you know, supporting the team or something. So other thoughts on that bullet? Is it unnecessary?
Schools aren't having those events right now to start with, so you don't have to attend them. But we've done it both ways, where you've been assigned schools and we've not been assigned schools. So.
Mm-hmm.
Or particular events. I mean, I don't think having this policy enforces us to assign specific sites, but that if we ever did assign specific events or sites, that this says we're going to adhere to it. And I think by adding represent the board at various school events when appropriate would address the concept that Steve was trying to get out.
Without going through that 2nd sentence, yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe change it to when appropriate would make me feel better about that.
Represent the board at various school events when appropriate. So if you had a Veterans Day program at an elementary school, and you might go and give out an award or something like that. Okay, Dr. Lee, your hand's up, or it did come.
Yeah, I was just agreeing with what Trustee Kelly and Trustee Bruno had mentioned. And 2, I believe we have a board representative with a specific role for doing what that's talking about. So
that's for CS,
the county
meetings.
Usually for the county, many county school boards associations have a representative.
Mm-hmm.
The way I know bigger districts a lot of times will assign either by your region, you might go to events, but I would put in there when we can get back to events. I'd love to see all of you, if you could make it come. I think it sends a great message. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't want to limit ourselves or say
make it
as broad as we can. Because
general as possible.
Yeah. And when appropriate, like you just said, Steve, because, you know, whether it's a award ceremony or just a tour or whatever, I think it would be great for all of you to have the ability to be anywhere you want to be.
And the schools notice.
Yes.
At the same time,
sure.
I do acknowledge that we all have lives outside of the board, and scheduling can be problematic at times. So I think leaving it as appropriate keeps it from being unreasonable.
And then taking out the whole 2nd half of the sentence, right?
Yes.
Yeah, it's unnecessary and confusing. Now, I speaking of unnecessary and confusing, that 3rd box there is a brief box that starts whenever possible. We've talked about the board acting collectively. That's in the first thing. We know that. This is talking about that committees have a direct and valuable impact. That seems, I'm speaking quite candidly now, because we're trying to work this to make it work for you guys. I think you wouldn't have a subcommittee of the board, a 2-member of a 5-member board subcommittee, if you didn't think it would have value and impact. So I'm a little confused by this box. Any other thoughts?
I think that this whole thing is weird because the two thoughts don't seem to go together at all. Is the sentence about committees, or is this the sentence about the board as a whole? And when you say each committee shall be considered, okay, considered.
I'm very confused by it.
Very confused. It's very ambiguous and vague. It makes no sense to me at all, the whole thing.
I don't think advances.
Please enlighten me.
I'm thinking it could be excised entirely.
Yep.
Okay, I'm seeing some consensus here. Let's go down to the next one. This is one of those mnemonic devices about, learning that. This is a list of ways to respond to board members. Do you feel it needs to be that specifically sketched out in step by step by step by step by step? Or is it that you're going to do something that's ended after as appropriate? Any thoughts?
Keeping in mind that this is a handbook, particularly of use to new board members,
Good point.
I actually like this. It reminds the incoming board member, we don't have the authority to get involved directly in these things. It is the proper protocol to refer it and let the appropriate people handle it.
I think it could be stated as a recommendation on a best practice, or something a little less restrictive as far as follow these steps. You may not need to repeat the information or remind them that board members have no authority. That may be irrelevant to the conversation. I think that these are good practices that we could follow.
It does say make an effort as appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that does keep in mind that these may not all be appropriate in all situations.
Shall we leave it? Shall we leave it as is? And when before the final gavel comes down, you'll be able to think about it and go. All right, the next one actually goes into the next page, which talks about when interacting with the public and constituents, board members hold themselves to highest level of professional ethical conduct. Is that necessary to say, or have we already covered that in the norms?
No, I think that's necessary because the norms are how we treat each other. This is specifically about our public representation of the district. I think they're different. There's a nuance there.
I would agree with that.
All right, I hear consensus. Looking to see any dissent, not seeing any. Okay, moving on to the next area, which is relationship, staff, and community. The first box gets into what specifically it has to do with some personnel practices. And this is a center, no pun intended. This needs to be center-centered. So this is not suggested verbiage for you if it is not, has not been, will not be your practice about board members on hiring committees. As you know, the pendulum is broad. Many districts have absolutely zero. I'll correct myself. Most districts have zero board member participation in hiring because the board has one hiring decision, and that's the superintendent. Sometimes in small and very rural areas, you may have a board member who hires bus drivers, who's on a committee or something. So I invite whatever reaction or input you have to this as it applies to center specifically. Dr. Lee, you got a hand?
Yes, I'm suggesting that we strike this entire first paragraph because to my knowledge, our board does not participate in hiring decisions in the district. I don't think it's relevant to us.
I would agree. In fact, frankly, it makes me kind of uncomfortable and seems to create an opportunity for abuse of the position.
Agreed.
Where are you guys? You've lost me.
We're under
the board's role.
Page 8.
Okay.
Top of page 8, the bold-faced board's role in relationship with staff and community.
I got you.
The second box under that bullet is about school visits. Let's be candid. Does this align with what has been your effective and accepted practice, or does it need tweaks?
I'm sorry, did we agree to strike that first paragraph?
I believe we did. Yes.
Okay, sorry.
I think Nancy was still trying to discern
sorry.
exactly what we were talking about. So
Yeah,
it's
I'm there.
sitting in on hiring decisions.
Yeah.
And we're suggesting.
Yeah,
to-
she was literally getting on the same page with us, literally and figuratively.
And Delray, did that, you with it on it? That's not been our district. Okay.
Delray's got the thumbs up.
Good.
Okay, the second box there is 3 paragraphs that have to do with the courtesy steps of advising folks when you do a school visit. Any tweaks or does this align with your practice?
I have a question on this one too. Board members shall provide advance notification to the superintendent of such visits. Is that our common practice? I appreciate notification of that because I've made visits where I did not notify the superintendent that I was, visiting or attending a school event.
What's been the practice, superintendent?
Yes, you inform the superintendent.
Usually
that
they
was
have,
our practice.
go ahead, Delray. I think I just went over what you were saying.
That's okay, Kelly did. She can continue.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was just agreeing with Delbert. I said it at the same time as you, Scott, that has been our practice.
Yeah, and only the difference would be, though, I think if you're going for something for your student, if you had a student enrolled to school or something like that, but if you're going to observe in classrooms or things like that, just a heads up. And the only being is that way the school sites tend to stress a little bit when a board member walks in thinking that there's a problem. That's the only thing I can think of. But with your own kids, and I'm thinking like, Steve, I know you were at Center High with your daughter, so
Yeah.
with Elizabeth,
Yeah.
so I know.
And oftentimes it's just by CCing the superintendent. You say, Principal Jones, I'm looking forward to be there for your assembly today.
Yeah.
CC superintendent.
So just to clarify something, that this makes total sense to me in terms of I want to go visit the campus and check it out. But for school events, for instance, let's say a football game. If we're going to go to a football game, we don't need to bother? Okay.
No,
I would prefer not to have my email inundated with that. But if you're going to like really tour the school, a lot of times I'll ask you guys when we're out of COVID, I'll ask you guys, would you like, Delray and I've done it. We did it in between that little break. I think Kelly, you and I did at 1.2 recently. If we can get in and see it, just to let them know we're coming. But if it's for something related to, hey, a football game, basketball, whatever it may be, a play,
band, concert, whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that's not necessary. And in fact, the Brown Act carves out, I think, specifically so that you don't feel you can't have more than 2 of us at the football game.
Right.
And also the very first phrase in this paragraph, in this section says when visiting schools or departments as a board member. So I think it pretty well clarifies that it's only if you're going there as an official representative of the board.
Okay.
The one thing I would say though is just it's very difficult to take off your board member hat ever. I know your parents, but when you come, and I've probably said this to all of you, when you guys walk on campus, you're probably now a board member first and a parent second, which is absolutely probably wrong. But that's why I went back, and not to beat this one up, but that your role on an interview definitely could weigh heavily and influence unduly. Just like I don't sit in on a lot of interviews because they tip their hat to me, and we want the best person hired regardless. So,
and along these lines, just personal disclosure, I had a meeting with some office staff for my student, and just as a courtesy, I gave Scott a heads up, just in case my presence there made anybody uncomfortable. I wanted him to know about it in advance.
Mm-hmm.
So
nice. Good. Nancy, got a hand?
Yeah, in the past, we had always been told that board members should not participate in volunteering with classroom groups or school sites, booster clubs, things like that, because it puts one board member in a position where they can be manipulated, or they get more information than other board members when there's issues that have to be resolved by the board. And that's just sort of been the agreement that we've all had in the past. And I wanted to know if we're going to stick to that, or if we're all on our own, or how do you want to handle that?
My personal opinion, then I would take your guys' advice, but I think even any of you, as you've come on the board, have given up certain roles and responsibilities at the local school sites to take on the broader role. Now, certainly if you wanted to volunteer or help out or something, we would encourage that, but like school site councils or PTAs, it's not a good practice for you guys to be on those that I've experienced. But so I think if you guys are okay with it, I would rather have a conversation about that. If you're going to be involved with something, just let's figure it out. But if you're just showing up to help out at a car wash, I think that's fantastic. But yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, Nancy, in regards to, somebody may or may not be given more information or be influenced, I think that information could be shared at a public board meeting with the other board members and could be useful in certain circumstances. So I wouldn't want to completely eliminate the possibility of interacting, like as a parent.
No, not as a parent, as a board member.
Or like let's say we had a grandparents reading program, which many districts have. Mm-hmm. I would love to volunteer for that.
Yeah.
And being able to sit with somebody, with a class and read to them, I don't think that would necessarely, it wouldn't be inappropriate, I don't think. Maybe
until you're sidelined by 6 teachers on your way into the, and believe me, it has happened.
Yeah, but that's where it goes back to the protocol we just agreed to. Is you're an individual on the campus. It is hard, but you have to go back to the protocols that we have established and have followed for years.
Yeah,
is if you're on the campus, if I'm with you, sometimes I can help deflect because I'll end up taking the conversation. But if you're by yourself, it is very hard. That's where, as a new board member, someone that bottom line there, where you receive the information and then process is critical.
They will tackle you.
Oh yes,
okay.
They tackle me too.
Happens.
You guys keep warning me of this, but no parent has ever approached me with
not
any
parent,
suggestions.
teachers, staff.
Parent, no teacher, no student, nobody has ever sidelined me with any questions ever. So maybe they just don't think I could help them. I don't know, but
we haven't been in school, Kelly. We haven't had union issues. And
you don't want to get in the middle of bargaining. Listen, I want to step away and not step away literally, but I wanted to make a bit of a time check. We're just about 50 minutes from our stop time. What I would like to do, because as this part of the discussion is continued, and in light of what I think Dr. Lee pointed out, I would like to commit to you guys that wherever we get to today, I would like to, Scott, I will arrange this with my superiors and stuff. I would like to try to schedule the continuation, to be a part of the continuation, if that's going to happen. As Steve said, let's see how far we get. But I'm looking, we're 50 minutes away. And I think we've got, to stick with the dancing analogy, I think I want to finish the dance with you. So I'm going to try to see if we can organize that. I know scheduling is always a problem, but I just want to put that out there so we know we're 50 minutes away. Let's see how far we get, and then we'll go to our next steps. So.
Perfect.
Okay, the next box I am puzzled by altogether, because I think I'm not sure that it says something new and instructive, and it seems to talk about something that staff, a protocol or for staff, like something that the superintendent was saying. Staff, if you've got something, if the board member wants something from you, what do you think, Steve? Thoughts?
Frankly, I don't like this section because I don't think we should go directly to staff for information. Yeah, I think it should be reworded. When requesting information from staff, the request should be done through the superintendent.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. And then just strike that second part, because you're right, Monica. We're not outlining what staff should or shouldn't be doing here. We're outlining what we're doing.
So. And then the other piece would be with that, just as a process for me, is there may be a time, and sorry, I'm looking at you, Steve, so I'll use you. Steve comes to me with a request on finance. Well, I'm going to lean to Lisa heavily. So it may be, hey, I'm going to talk to Lisa, or I may put you in direct contact with Lisa, or that type of stuff. So that happens quite frequently, but at least I'm in the communication chain. And I do know over the years, if someone has gone to an individual, they've always come back to me and said, hey, Kelly called me and asked me this question. Great. So I
Okay.
think that process has worked great because I don't know everything. And so gets in the weeds where we will put you in contact with staff, whoever that staff may be.
Great.
So are we okay with changing it through the superintendent and then striking the second paragraph?
Consensus, Nancy, your hand?
Yeah, past practice has always been too, that when like informational reports that are going to take a lot of time come up, that members have to agree to it before Scott gets people involved in it. Are we going to stick to that?
I'm sorry, your audio cut out for a second there. Could you please repeat that?
Past practices have been that when a board member is asking for something that's going to take a lot of time and effort to put together, that 3 board members have to agree to bringing that up and having that done before Scott's going to direct people to put a lot of time and effort into it. Are we going to stick to that? Is my question.
I would suggest the best process for that would be is if I get it and I determine I would work with the board president to make sure it'd be a reasonable request and then share all information with all of you. If that works, that still goes through. Let's say, Nancy, you made a request. Sorry, Kelly, I'll pick on you. I know when you came back on the board, we had some HVAC stuff that we were looking into. And I don't remember who was the board president. Del Rey was at the time. And I said, hey, I'm going to put this together. And then I shared it with all of you. So that's a helpful process to me, to have just one other person to do it. Nowadays, with the way we can generate reports, some of them are a lot easier than others to just bang out and then share with all of you. But that would be my practice. But if it's something that's, hours and hours of work, I'm going to go to the board president and then say, hey, do we want to go down this road, or how do we?
That's exactly what I'm talking about. When it takes a lot of work, because there for a while you were being pulled in 20 different directions.
Well, we had a lot of new members, so that also, there's a lot of getting people up to speed. So
no, that was before that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
My only concern with this, Scott, and
Hold on, Steve, we're coming back at you.
Yeah, no problem.
Nancy, you've definitely led me in the right direction on this one. But my only concern with leaving it up to you, Scott, is that you are too nice.
Absolutely.
And so I kind of am leaning towards saying, yes, it should be at least 2 or 3 board members requesting the information so that you can kind of taper down the information to exactly what you need, so you're not overtaxing the staff. And I agree with that. And I'm probably the biggest offender of that, because when I came back on the board, I asked for a ton of information that I thought was pretty easily accessible, but may not have been. So probably,
Kelly, I hearken back to when we did our first workshop together as this group. I remember we talked specifically about having confidence and trust in the superintendent in the role of triage, because we want to sort of advance triage for him. And then we just sort of say, look, we're just going to have to trust him, so that when he says bandwidth is gone, or that I'm pressed, or my staff is stressed, whatever, that he will tell you that rather than you guessing it. Scott, does
Monica,
agree.
Scott would kill himself for this job. 24
I believe
hours
it, I
a
believe
day.
Maybe not that.
I would just caution you to truly use a triage approach, Scott.
So
That's all.
President Bruno.
my concern with this is if we start saying things that take a lot of time, require 3 board members, that's very inexact. And oftentimes, those of us who aren't the ones preparing the reports or something don't necessarily know what it entails. So it's hard for us to make the determination of what's going to take a lot of time and what's not. So I do think that Scott needs to triage and decide what needs a board majority and what is something that can just be cranked out. Because I don't think we're in a place to know, and I think using inexact terminology like that presents us with the opportunity to be inconsistent.
So I think we're all in agreement that we don't need to add anything to this policy.
I think
And
there's a couple hands up. But there
Dr.
wasn't.
Lee's got a hand up. Yeah, Dr. Lee.
My comment was more on just revising this paragraph to say board members shall request information from the superintendent, so that we're not making any direct requests for information.
Exactly.
to
It
staff.
seems rather, it's convoluted the way it's structured there, so.
And then that whole
All right,
paragraph, subsequent paragraph about management staff and all that, it should be stricken because
It's immaterial.
it's not
Yeah,
relevant.
it's not about it. Good. Thank you, guys. You're doing exactly what I was just about to ask is let's bring these discussions are so good because I love it because we've got, a longtime board member like Nancy saying, hey, well, I remember the practice was this and da, 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 da. It's a good discussion, but also we want to make this document a good tool. So thank you for bringing it back to that. Now, the next protocol area is about board meeting agenda. There are only about 2 or 3 items. The second one should be the low-hanging fruit because it sets out about your board meeting formula. I have mixed feelings on this. I'm not really sure this needs to be codified in your thing, but it's good. A lot of people like to know the high school board meets the first Tuesday of the month or whatever. What's your feeling about, we'll come back to the first box, but I want to get rid of the second box easy because as I say, it should be pretty straightforward. What are your thoughts about how you would like to articulate your meeting schedule?
Well, first, I would just want to put our regular meeting doesn't begin at 7. And I hope that we're not changing it too.
No. Please. Okay, other thoughts?
I would say, to be honest, when we hand out this is one of the questions that new board members or even the committee asks. So we already tell them the pattern. The board actually votes this pattern in annually or a pattern in annually. So I think it's redundant to say that. And my comment to any new board member, usually the first thing I say is we meet the 3rd Wednesday of the month. We try to keep our first Wednesdays of the month open. We do begin at 6 with closed session, trying to start at 5 unless we need 5:30. And then there are some random Saturdays such as this that we would work with everyone's schedule.
Trustees, would you be comfortable with the superintendent just putting that down and giving Carol that verbiage?
Yes.
Yeah, and I like the part, Scott, about that the board votes on it annually.
That's true. It is an organizational meeting. It is an organizational meeting action item. Yeah.
I was actually going to say, because it's voted on and published elsewhere, we might not need it here, but actually I think it is good to have it.
Remember, a big role, a big part that this document plays is to onboard new members. So this is
right
for the future guys. Okay, back to the first one. It's very instructive in the age of where we are now. A lot of folks do not understand this first statement, that a school board meeting is your meeting and not a town hall. So that might be something that's more important today than it might have been 10 or 15 years ago. What are our thoughts on that first box? And then we'll move on and wrap up this section.
I'd just like to state that this does not necessarily describe the way we've been running our meetings more recently. However, I think that maybe we need to return to this because the way we've been doing it has led to some chaos at times, which has been counterproductive. So I think maybe formalizing this and getting back to it will be a step in the right direction.
Good thought. Dr. Lee?
I would just add to that, often it feels, especially during public comments, that it turns into an open forum town hall meeting. And it really, it's disconcerting. I don't see anything in here about, public comments and how we receive them. But I know that the practice on other boards that I watch that seem to be high functioning is they literally receive the information and they say, thank you. The president or whoever says, thank you. That's it. It doesn't go into a long discussion or a town hall forum meeting. So I'd like for us to, if possible, address that and get some decorum around that so that we receive information, we don't deliberate it or get into discussions about it during public comment. And, if it needs to be an agendized item, it become an agendized item.
That is actually addressed in a later protocol.
Yeah, okay. Many, I haven't seen one of your agendas in a while, so I don't know, but some boards will put the public comment specifics on their agenda so that as it's posted, it'll say,
they're there, but what we practice is different.
Yes.
And I'm asking that hopefully we can
a
Yeah.
good, a good,
Sometimes
a
we
good
do
learning.
become reactive.
Yeah.
I just wanted to
Nancy-
say about this policy that I did not realize the difference. I didn't realize that it wasn't an open forum meeting for the public until I probably I knew it, but it just didn't register until someone told me that. And so I think it's really important to have that in here because it's a great reminder that this is our meeting. That's what, Trustee Anderson said. This is our meeting. This is not the public's meeting. We are holding our meeting in public. And I think this reminder is great. So I think
Nancy, I see your hands up.
Two things. The first being that we have leaned towards letting the public be heard, especially when there are major issues in the district. And there's supposed to be a 3-minute limit, but some of those people have gone for an hour, That was one issue. The other issue is we were always told that this is it's not a public meeting, but a meeting being held in public.
Right.
Is the difference. And that kind of helps, I think, people understand what's going on rather than town hall versus.
It's true. And as Dr. Lee said, we can never remind ourselves enough because it's one of the most difficult things to do sitting on the dais is to not respond, engage, heaven help us, deliberate to public comment. It's very difficult. Great presidents, President Bruno, I bet you're one of these. They know how to do that with that benign face, not looking, I agree, I disagree, just saying, thank you for your input. Very difficult to do, but that's it. So, okay, so what are we seeing? This verbiage, what do you think, Scott?
I'm sorry, I was just going to add it. The hard part is the town hall idea can be fine when it's something of celebration or whatever, but unfortunately when you get into negotiations or you get into personnel matters, it really causes us problems. So we really, I want to just re-stress that we really need to get back to thank you for your comments, appreciate it, because if our pattern is different, it starts to look like, well, wait a minute, now all of a sudden you're not asking questions and we're hearing this hearing. So and we've all probably been guilty. I know I have, so I just think that's something we could continue to better for the betterment of the district as a whole.
Well, that's a good point because we've had times when the public has attacked personnel, and I think everybody needs to hear what needs to be done when a teacher or employee is being attacked from the public at a board meeting.
So let's move on from this. I'm feeling like when this comes back to you for final approval, if you have further thoughts that germinate, but I'm hearing that this is a valuable section to leave in.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the third one, the last one, which is the very top of the next page, which is basically it's a little confusing language when it talks about historical structure utilized by the board. It's basically just it might need to be collapsed in with the next bullet under it, which says that the superintendent and the board president are essentially crafting the agenda. What do you think about, can we look at these two boxes together all of a piece and see if they need to be specifically separate or combined? Kelly?
Yeah, I can't see everybody, so I apologize if I've talked over. I'll try and remember to just raise my hand. I definitely think that the board president and superintendent should be able to make necessary and appropriate changes when needed in order to make the meeting run efficiently. For instance, when we have to approve every month or not approve every month, whether or not a person can continue to use the waiver on the Brown Act. That doesn't make sense to have it buried at the end of the meeting. And so rearranging that for logistical purposes makes sense. And I dare say that the rest of the board really wouldn't be interested in that decision, nor would it be needed. So I think, yes, combining these two and saying that when it's necessary or appropriate, the structure of the agenda may be altered with the approval of or may be reorganized by consultation between the superintendent and board president.
Dr. Lee.
I didn't quite understand about approval for whether a person can do something with the Brown Act, but my point on this one, you know, we have mentioned that we want to give the superintendent and staff advance notice of questions and so forth that we may have about the agenda. That's really difficult to do when the board receives the agenda and notice of it at the same time that the public does, 72 hours before a meeting takes place. Oh, and a weekend when staff and superintendent aren't working. So how do we overcome that so that it's not feeling like a gotcha and that folks do have, you know, time to prepare for questions?
I don't understand your question, Lee. Could you please repeat it?
What part didn't you understand?
Can you repeat the question?
Which one? You want me to repeat everything I just said?
I think she was, if I may sort of paraphrase for understanding, she was talking about sometimes there's a timing issue when the board packet, when the agenda post and the supporting material post, because staff is always working right at the very last minute to meet the posting requirement and get it out by 72 hours, but it's not usually 4, 5, 6 working days. It's just right there. And then it's also the same time. And that sometimes happens over a weekend and maybe board members feel like, well, I can't call the superintendent on a Saturday to ask my question or this or that. That poses a difficulty. And that happens all the time, whether people meet on Monday or Tuesday or even Wednesday. What I'm wondering though is there language that we think that needs to, this is talking about agenda preparation under the aegis of the superintendent and the president creating the agenda, and then the board members putting item on the agenda. That's all part of creating the agenda. That's part and parcel of creating the agenda. And then the board president, superintendent discussing the contents of the agenda. Well, of course they're discussing it. They are crafting the agenda. So I find second box to be sort of overstating the obvious. That's my reaction to that. Kelly?
Well, 2 thoughts. So it says in here that board members may request items to be placed on the agenda. And in general, I don't think we've ever not put something on the agenda that someone has requested. So folks should have a general idea of what's going to be on the agenda. Not necessarily if they didn't request it, but also, I mean, do we want to put some language in here that says that, you know, the draft could be provided in advance, or is that too much of a imposition on staff?
It's gonna be hard to get the full material out ahead of time when we're trying.
Not the full material, just the draft agenda, just the, you know, the 3 yellow pages that shows the structure of the meeting and the items that are on it.
We could certainly work the soonest because our agenda items are due to us the week prior. So like, for example, our meeting on the 16th, items were due to us on the 4th, and then we work all next week to put it together. So we could certainly put it in as a draft. Usually by Tuesday, I'm trying to work with the president and share what we are, or where we are, I mean. So we might not have the backup material at that point. It's just go ahead.
I'm sorry, and then let's suppose that you sent it out to everybody on the board on Tuesday and someone had a concern with what was on the agenda. Would we change it? Would the board president and superintendent make that decision? I mean, are we going to upset people if something's on the agenda, they object to it prior to it being posted, but that it's still on the agenda? Or should we codify that? There's so many questions, and I don't know which side of the.
You know, Kelly, I'm going to give a little bit of a homework assignment, which may be instructive in this. In the 9,000s, in 9,000 plural, the 9,000 series of your bylaws are the ones that set out how the board does business, and it does speak to some of this. I was looking it up to see what number it was from this book, Call of Duty, because it does set out some guidelines about the authority, the discretion and authority the superintendent and board president can use to determine if an item is agenda worthy, agenda needed. You know, a savvy superintendent, board member may come and say, hey, I got this issue. I've heard from the community, Good superintendent may go out and deal with it, and it's done before the next board meeting.
Right.
Does that mean the superintendent might still want to include it in his or her recap report and say, you know, we dealt with this issue about But the board president and the superintendent have some discretion and authority about putting items on the agenda outlined in your bylaws. So I would suggest that might be, before we meet again, we might want to revisit what the bylaws say about this aspect. Steve?
So addressing that, it might be possible to get the agenda out to board members a few days earlier without the board packet. But I think if we get into the cycle of, well, then if somebody wants something changed, we'll change it. I think that starts putting an undue burden on staff to have to rewrite the agenda, rewrite the packet. So I think if we're going to get it out early, it would kind of be informational only.
Agreed.
Agree, Steve. It would have to be, because if it's determined something's put on by, you know, a member requests it and you and I consult and we put it on there as board president, and then, you know, Kelly's going to argue with us about it. I mean, pretty soon I'm worried we're treading on Brown Act stuff. I think what I heard was, how do we get more ample time to create our questions and then possibly give staff a heads up on that. So I'm open to suggestions. I'm worried about extending our development of the agenda timeline, because we go once a month. It's going to put it harder on staff. We're going to have a lot more things that are ratified, because I have to draw the line, Carol, and I have to draw the line of when items are due that aren't board member requests, just pure things. So I don't have an answer for it, other than we do get it out the 72 hours, but then the weekend before, which I know is hard for you guys too, because you probably don't want to work on the weekend either. So I don't have an answer to that. I don't know. Delray, did you have a question or something? Nope. Okay.
I have a raised hand. So my comment was in line with what Superintendent Lair mentioned. Of course, definitely just informational only. As a board member, I have felt assailed and surprised sometimes by things that pop into the agenda that I wasn't aware of and that we hadn't formally discussed as a board. And so, you know, getting access to the agenda at the same time that the public does when it's already a done deal doesn't give me as a board member the respect and time, you know, of knowing what's coming up and what folks may be asking, you know, me about. And it doesn't give me the time to ask timely questions to the superintendent or to the president or to things that could, informational requests that could be made. So I would definitely appreciate, you know, early access to the agenda, not the board item and all of that, but just the agenda, so I have a heads up of what's on the horizon for me as we go to next meetings.
Superintendent, I would a quick, not wanting the meter to be running too long, but a quick check with council about sending board members the agenda without supporting materials in advance, just to make sure. Cool.
Sure.
Okay, I want to give a time check here. We're about 25 minutes away. This template is constructed in an odd way because the next section gets into a specific meeting task, which happens not at every meeting, but frequently, which has to do with policy adoption. And then it resumes all these good aspects of being in the meeting that we're talking about. So I'd like you to give me your feeling, if you'd like us to follow along the way this template is guiding us into this next discussion about policy. It says chart of policy revision. It's really policy development and adoption. But if we'd like to continue on the way the template goes, or skip the policy thing to come back to in our follow-on session and continue with these aspects, because if you look at pages 10 and 11, this is really what we've been talking about things going on. You board members get the packet and what they do in seeking information. Any thoughts on whether we just temporarily skip and come back to the policy development adoption process? or just continue on? Anybody have thoughts, preferences one way or the other? Steve?
I personally would like to stick with the other stuff that we're getting into and then come back to this at the
Okay,
next.
because this is very specific. Kelly, your thoughts?
Agreed. I think this is addressed in board policy. And so, I mean, for me, if we were going to talk about this, we would also have to develop a whole process on board policy that is presented outside of CSBA. And so then it just gets way too muddy. I think it belongs in policy, and we should just strike it from this document.
All right, let's revisit that, and for now continue on to what is now currently on the template, page 10, and you'll see we in the next 25 minutes. I do want to harken back to our discussion guide, which was in a perfect world, which we all aspire to live in, which we don't. We had talked about using the last part of our time together this morning to talk about how does this tool, this document, live with us in the future. Obviously, those are questions to reflect on and pose when we have had more time to complete this process. So we will not pose those reflective questions here on February 5th, but do know that we'll come back to them, because I said that it would be a shame to do this work, have a handbook, and then put it on the shelf to gather dust. So we're not going to spend any of our next 25 minutes talking about the reflections. We'll continue to work through this, and then we will talk about some next steps when we get in about the last 5-10 minutes or so. We're at the top of page 10. This is a topic we've already sort of begun to dance into, which is board members putting questions to the superintendent and staff so that they can have their questions satisfactorily addressed before they ever sit down at the board table, and so that the superintendent knows that this is something that might come up in the meeting. The second paragraph talks about what we know about any information that goes to one board member goes to all of that stuff. It talks about this one. I've heard this reference, say trustees acknowledging that their questions are spontaneous. I don't think that I've actually heard at a board meeting a trustee say, wow, this is a spontaneous question, which I didn't ask in advance, because heck, you're listening, you're thinking, you're learning. Questions are coming to you as you listen and learn. So I'm not sure that I really like that statement. I would entertain thoughts about that top box. Anyone?
I would just start to say, obviously, I know, and it's happened over the years that I've been doing this, there are always opportunities when board members or anyone thinks of questions. So I would never want to stifle that spontaneous question, because you may not think of it at all. And probably all of you have done it. The one thing I just want to put out there is staff does the best job they can trying to make sure they have answers. They want to answer the questions. They may not. I just want to make sure it is acceptable that staff might say, we'll have to get back to you on that, because we certainly will not lie. We won't make something up, and not that you would ever want that. And then anytime we can help staff answer questions prior to is always helpful, because then they feel like they can more fully answer your question. And we would never want you to ask a question, and once we answer it behind the scenes or before, that you don't bring it up. That would never be the intent. Obviously, letting us know so we can have an answer for you is always, it helps everyone look good and no surprises. But there are going to be surprises. That's the way a meeting works.
Of course. Other thoughts? Anybody?
Just kind of piggybacking on that, I do think it's important that if you have a question that you're posing ahead of time, there's a good chance that a member of the community has the same question. So I think it is good to pose it during the meeting as well. But that being said, it can be useful to have the information ahead of time if it's available. Sometimes the answer to it when you ask ahead of time is, I'll have to get back to you on that. But by having the answer ahead of time, it might lead to a follow-up question that, where the answer information could be gathered ahead of time. So I just see this as very beneficial, but want to make sure that we continue the questions in public as well.
And that is standard practice. Other thoughts, anybody, about that top box specifically? Let's move to the next one, which is, I would characterize this as needless to say. The phrase needless, somebody says needless to say, and then they say it anyway. Well, this is needless to say, but it's said, self-monitored compliance to a public meeting. That's just a way of what you had a protocol earlier that said respect confidentiality. or something to that effect, which this seems to say to me. Any thoughts? Is it superfluous?
To be honest, leaving it in there for a new member, just so they recognize that it might not, I don't see it as hurting or helping either way, but having it in there might just make people aware of it.
Good point, Scott. Thank you for reminding us that that's a big part that this document plays, is helping to onboard board members.
Yeah.
The next one gets into the area about, we've all talked about, about the Brown Acts, about avoiding reply all, serial meetings, email meetings. It's fairly straightforward. Any comments or tweaks that would be suggested there, anyone? And then the next,
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Lee.
The board members, when responding, may not reply to all, which I think is super important, to have, especially for new members. But is there anywhere in here, maybe I haven't gotten to it yet, where it addresses just even sending out communications to all, not a reply to all, but sending it out to all about agendized items or upcoming agendized items? Because I think it's important that, new board members and current board members kind of keep in alignment with that, not just in responding to things, reply all, but into sending out communications with all of us, all the board members included on it, about things that may be potential.
We see emails such as that that have disclaimers either at the beginning or at the end that say, this is for information only, please do not reply, or some such. Nancy, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a real problem with this one, because the way I understand it from our previous meetings is that members of the public the questions they have are supposed to be sent to the board president. The board president is supposed to be the one who responds to them. It's my understanding that his response to them can go to all of us, because then we know they've been responded to. But we are not to respond to that response at all in any manner, shape, or form. And in that way, we know that the public's comments and concerns have been addressed, and that his response should be as if letting them know the board has seen your comment and received your comment. Basically, end of discussion. Am I right or wrong?
Steve?
Kelly had her hand up first.
Oh, Kelly, go ahead.
Yeah, you are correct, Nancy. In the past, that was our policy. And when I first became president last December, that was the policy we were using. However, it became a concern. And when Scott consulted with Scott Holbrook, our legal advisor, he recommended against that at all. He said that there should not be any reply all, regardless of whether it's just letting you know that it has been responded to. So we adopted that policy separately. Maybe
That's
not, a
not
formal
what I
policy,
remember.
but that practice.
That's not what I remember from Scott.
So a better way to handle it, and I will acknowledge that I recently did that where I replied all, and as soon as I did a reply all, I went, shouldn't have done that. But a better way would be for me to reply to the member of public and then craft an email to the rest of you saying, just to let you know, I addressed this issue, so the person has been responded to.
Right. The issue that came up too, I think, Kelly, sorry, I'm going to harken back to what brought this forward, was the individual board member was giving his or her opinion to the respondent, and then that was getting copied to the entire board. And that's where Scott was like, no, if you're going to respond on behalf of the board, it might be, we've received your email. Thank you very much. Individual members may respond individually to you, but when we started, if people start giving their let's say it was an upcoming agenda item, and they started giving their perspective, that could be a problematic when now the other four members know, Kelly's going to vote a certain way. That's a no-no.
Right.
So what we would want to adopt or consider would be the idea that if Steve is board president is going to respond, he can do an acknowledgement, which could copy the other members. So you all know that he responded, or he could send a separate one-way communication that he responded. And it would never limit you each from responding individually to the constituent and giving your perspective, if that makes it more muddy.
No,
One
it's-
more
Go ahead.
comment on that. I'm sorry, one more comment on that. The problem that we ran into with the process that you just outlined, Scott, where you're replying to acknowledge, is that it can open up the possibility that the person they're replying to then again responds and includes all of the board members. That's happened this past year with a staff member, and it became a big issue. So if you I mean, I guess that could happen anyway, but I just think replying all in general, it has not been a good practice for us.
So the consideration then would be is I think as the non-president, let's say, how would I know and feel comfortable that someone has responded, or is that irrelevant? I think
I think it should be, like Steve said, a separate email just saying this has been responded to.
Yeah, and not
I
give
don't
any
think
sort
we
of
should
opinion.
respond at all to him. I think it should be the president.
No.
That's
That's what
he
I'm
said.
saying, that the president would just send a note to the rest of the board saying this has been responded to.
Yeah, and responded. We're drawing a distinction between an acknowledgement and a substantive response.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
So,
Nancy?
and Nancy, even if the president responds, if you want to respond, you are free to do that. You don't have to, but we can't limit board members' ability to respond to constituents.
Then you end up with the problem where if you have 3 of us respond in a certain way, then they know where we're going.
Well, you shouldn't be responding in a certain way. You should be acknowledging. I think that's what point we're trying to distinguish. We're going to stop and talk about going forward, but is the next one quick enough to look at very quickly? It's talking about setting cell phones on vibrate, being discreet when checking devices. Is this getting into the weeds, ladies and gentlemen?
I don't think we need it.
Well, actually, I think this goes back to what Del Rey was saying earlier about not checking Facebook or email during a meeting, which did frankly get me in trouble early on, and I should not have done that. And as a new board member, I didn't realize I shouldn't have done that until our Brown Act training, and I went, oh, yeah, I blew that.
So is it of benefit then to include this box or some version of it, even though the protocols we previously did talked about being respectful and present and all that? I posed that to the group. Nancy, your hand's up. Is that new or from before?
No, that was from before. I'm sorry.
Okay. What about any thoughts on this, Del Rey?
Where I was going with this is that when we are virtual, some of us are virtual, some of us are together. The advantage of the people that are Zooming in or telephoning in have the availability of answering emails or answering messages or accepting these and replying to this information while the other board members are sitting in person. They are receiving information and responding where we're not. Because, we are present. Not that the others are not present, it's just that they have that capability of doing so. And this has happened in the past. And that's where I was going with
I
this.
understand. Steve, you had a thought.
Well, I just want to say this goes beyond the ones remoting in, because I was, I frequently have multiple tabs open on a browser. Anytime I'm using a browser, it's a bad habit. But I had the board agenda, the board packet, and my email, and I saw that I got an email and I checked it. So those of us who have electronic devices, even if we're present in the board meeting, can do the same exact thing, and it's a bad practice.
I'm spanking your hand, Steve.
Oh, yeah.
But Steve, when that happened, you were Zooming in, you weren't present.
No,
in the
he
meeting.
was there in person.
I was in the board meeting.
Yeah.
Using my device.
You sound
I thought I
particularly
was-
chastened. I see Kelly, then Dr. Lee.
I was actually next, and
Oh, go ahead.
before Mr. Bruno.
Go ahead.
But I just want to, this is constantly something that's mentioned in our boards, and the rhetoric around it is very disconcerting. This idea that depending on your modality of how you're participating in a meeting, you're present or not. Maybe we need to put something in our governance guidelines about it, because whether someone's on the phone, in face-to-face, however, on Zoom, they're present and they're participating.
I think you misheard what I said.
Possibility for, I think the possibility for us to really move forward as a board. I like these guidelines. Whether someone, whatever modality they're coming into the meeting with, they could be distracted by a device and looking at a device. I know that I always have my laptop with me and I do everything digitally. So whether I'm sitting in front of you or, I'm coming in through Zoom or coming in through the phone, I'm always going to have that present. So I think it's important to just kind of note, that we should be present in the meeting and not responding to the public and not messaging one another on our devices as well, because that has happened in previous meetings.
Kelly. Make it as brief as you can, Kelly.
Gosh, sure, Monica. No, I feel like we have two different conversations happening here. One is about the use of device and being present in the meeting. The other is a protocol about not responding to anyone regarding items that are currently being discussed on the board. Two completely different issues. Although I understand what you're saying, Dr. Lee, about keeping these rules, I do kind of feel like they're unnecessary, but at the other side of it, I don't think is unnecessary. I think making sure that we do not respond to anybody in regards to items that are being discussed on the agenda is extremely important.
I think that's what I was stating, Miss Kelly, is exactly that.
Yeah. No, I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
Del
saying.
Rey.
I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
Two different things going
Thank you.
on.
Okay.
And I think separately addressed in the verbiage and the protocols that will come before you to final. So that would be the large box at the top of page 10, excising the skinny box that's below it, and then the next two boxes, the third one having to do with cell phones and being discreet. I suggest when we revisit the rest of the protocols on this template with regard to board meetings and agenda, which you see go over the next page, will be in our follow-on dance. As I said, before we get off that specifically, I just want to mention this. There has been some pushback from folks about, you notice this, the template, the reason it has, I believe it has the phrase in there about be discreet when checking devices, because that presumes one might be checking a device. So a purist approach might be, well, good grief, turn your phone off, do that. But then you have people that say, I have kids, I have an aging parent, I need to know this, blah, blah, blah. So it has been sort of accepted that you can't be a purist and just tell people turn off your devices. That's something we want to keep in there. Steve, another thought on that before we sort of try to do a little bit of a wrap up and a next steps discussion?
So just really quick, I agree, can't be a purist on that, because sometimes, you do need to have a device available in case of an emergency. We've all got family situations and loved ones with health concerns and things, so we might need to have that available. Although it's discouraged to be used, I wouldn't want to say a hard and fast rule about it. But getting back to the email thing, I view the issue as bigger than just responding to them. Even if you're just reading incoming emails, as Scott Holbrook pointed out, that's giving some members of the public a different level of access than others.
Yep.
So we need to not do that.
Nancy, your
So
hands
how
up.
do we just get that incorporated into this policy? Do we add it to this existing one, or do we do a separate thing specifically for, not interacting with anyone regarding items on the agenda?
Kelly, she had called on me real quick. To quickly bring up that we all know a board member that we had that would constantly say, all of my people or my people are telling me. That language means nothing to any of you who don't know that, because anybody can say that. She had nobody behind her that anybody ever seen, but all her people were telling her this. So just be cautious of that.
Sounds like the voice of experience here, Nancy. Dr. Lee, your hand was up, or?
Yes, I just was putting in my vote to remove that item in an effort, that whole section. I think it's unreasonable. I think we're in the 21st century, and folks like me and others use their devices for these meetings. I don't handle paper. I do everything digitally. So I'll always have my device and it'll always be present, but I think it is important that we're not communicating with the public and elevating comments that are being sent to us through email. So maybe addressing it through that way, but not banning devices or, putting any restrictions on that.
Well, I'm going to use that as a perfect springboard to segue into a next step, because think back to an hour and 20 minutes ago when you did some good work on norms. And if you went back and revisited the norms that you did, you would find that they are quite substantially appropriate for covering they're the good strategic ways to handle this without getting into the tactical ways that those things are lived out. So your norm work really covers a lot of this: professional, focused, intentional. All those good descriptors that you did in the norms come into play here, which is to say we still have more work to do. And Superintendent, you and I will have a subsequent discussion to think about how this works. We've got 8 busy squares here. Well, let's not, I'm going to include Carol and Eugene here. Thank you, Carol and Eugene. We love you. We'll give you the whole applause thing, because we've done good work here. But I think even if we all said, hey, I'll hang around another hour, I think we're getting a little tired and we might not be doing our best work. Plus, if we want to honor one of our norms is that we honor our meeting times, So Superintendent and President Bruno, that being said, for next steps, if I proposed on behalf of CSBA that we would try to coordinate a follow-on session to continue as we have been doing today, that would be question 1. And the second part is, as your pleasure is, would it be helpful for the trustees to get a recap of the good work that Carol has captured so far, or would it be better to wait until the entire process is done to feed it back? So I leave that in your hands, Steve. What are your thoughts on those 2 questions?
I would like to try to schedule a follow-up so that we can continue this. I think it's become very clear that each of us has a different perspective, and I think breaking it to a subcommittee would exclude too many points of view. So I would like to do that. And my personal thought is that it would be beneficial to get an updated one so that we can begin to think from that point moving forward.
Superintendent, would you concur?
Works for us. So what we'll do is offline, Monica, you and I can figure out what your schedule is like to try and get some dates. I'll bring it back to this group to see what works for them. And then in the interim of that, Carol and I will work to make the updates that we believe we've captured so far. And we could share that out as soon as possible. And certainly prior to any future or second step in this. Works for me.
If you have any questions, ask Kelly. She's just looking for Carol's job.
Kelly, your hand is up, actually or virtually or both.
Question about how much time do we think we might need to finish this? There's only 2 pages left out of 12. And so I have no further comments on anything other than what might come up in conversation. Well, there's 2.5 pages left, but do we think an hour would be sufficient? And could we incorporate that as a workshop, say prior to a regular meeting? Just a food for thought.
I'm not sure that an hour would be sufficient. but I don't know. It's hard to say.
I would hate to have it with a certain cutoff short time like that, because then we might not finish again.
Yeah. What I would suggest is if we, and Monica, you and I could talk, we schedule let's say we schedule 3 hours, so we're all committed. And then if we only go an hour, hour and a half, then woohoo, we get an hour and a half of our lives back. I will say, I think in the mornings like this, I'd probably rather be with my family too this morning. But I think we're fresher when we've woken up and done this. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired right now from the 3 hours we've done. So it's intense. So I think if we could schedule a Saturday or a separate day, like a 5 to 8 or something like that, that might be a better way of attacking it. And then if we're done, we're done, you know.
Good point. Good point. Well, that said, I thank each of you for just jumping in and modeling really good behavior on how these things are done. I'm quite happy with what we have made progress on so far, and I thank you. And I turn it back to the president for the resumption of the meeting.
Okay, thank you. So the next agenda item is advanced planning. We have a future meeting date of Wednesday, February 16th at 6:00 p.m. Are there any suggested agenda items? Kelly?
Yeah, not necessarily for this meeting coming up, but I think that we do need to address the concept of having an equity policy. And so whatever we need to do to develop that, I think we need to start getting that agendized.
I made a note of that myself. I was thinking, because this meeting's coming up quickly, that might be better for the March meeting.
And we do have and I could pull it. I think in the new batch, and actually an equity template from CSBA. So that would be a good starting point. Instead of starting from a blank slate, we could utilize that and then adapt it to what the board defines as the policy they want.
Carol, are you bringing back new policies for the second reading, or are we keeping our old ones?
The policy, you have the batch that will come back on this as the second reading, but there's another batch that's in the mix that we just got. So we have another update policy.
But you want us to save the old ones?
Yes, please. That would save some paper.
I also sent this through email to you all, Stephen, Scott. It was about the equity plan, and I'm sorry, I forgot the second one. Oh, the second one was about consider revising the board policy and development process in our bylaws to conform to page 9 of the governance handbook template. So I'd like to see that come up for agenda, so that our process that we use to develop or revise board policies is clearer. I really find the language that's in the template to be much clearer than what we have now.
Okay, I have not had a chance to review that email yet. Was that this morning that you sent that, or?
No, you all asked us, as we saw revisions and things that weren't being discussed in detail, to email it to you during this meeting. So that's what we did. Yeah, it's feedback on the governance handbook. That's the title of it.
Okay, I will take a look at that when I get a chance. Again, I feel hesitant to add anything to the February meeting on short notice. But okay.
That would be for March, Steve. Sorry, just to clarify.
Okay, thank you. And then, the other thing that I had in mind, there was an item on our December agenda regarding student board members that you had asked Dr. Lee to be on there. We did address it to the best of our ability, but I wasn't sure if that covered what you wanted to address. So I wanted to make sure, if it didn't, that we do get that on a future agenda as well.
If we could, I saw from the notes that the board felt we should revisit this after the pandemic, but given that we don't know when this pandemic is ending, I think we should, move ahead with including students.
And require them to come to a meeting?
No, we would allow them to participate virtually, I would hope.
It
would, we have had.
They would be free to participate virtually or attend the meetings the same as other board members.
Actually, you know what? I think that this would be a discussion that we would have during a board meeting in order.
You all right? You all right? Thank you, Kelly. I appreciate the correction.
I was correcting myself, just so you know.
Yes.
Did we have one at the last meeting?
We discussed it at the December meeting, but Dr. Lee was out ill that meeting, so I wanted to make sure, since she was the one that had requested that it be added to the agenda, that we had addressed what she wanted. So, Scott, would that be something we could add to the February meeting, or should we push that one out to March?
We're in the middle. The items just came in from Friday, so we're actually starting. So we could do it either way. I mean, if it's just a discussion, we can put it on.
Okay, does that work for everybody? Okay, let's have that discussion then. Okay, anything else? Okay, do I have a motion to? And do I have a second?
Second.
All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate you giving up your Saturdays, and that goes for board members and others who are here to support us as well. Thank you, guys.